The bus came to a sudden stop. Dozens of passengers turned their heads as the driver pointed toward the young Nigerian woman, standing quietly near the back. "You need to get off." Confused, she looked around. "Excuse me, did I do something wrong?" Nobody answered. Some passengers avoided eye contact. Others whispered while secretly recording with their phones. Holding back tears, the Nigerian nurse slowly stepped off the bus into the cold Seoul rain. The doors closed. But just before the bus pulled away, a sharply dressed Korean man stood up. Without saying a word, he walked off the bus and stood beside her in the pouring rain. No one recognized him. They had no idea the man who had just left the bus was one of the richest CEOs in South Korea. And by sunrise, everyone who humiliated the young nurse would wish they had never done it. Welcome back to Afrokorea Seoul Stories, where unforgettable Nigerian Korean love stories, emotional twists, and life-changing moments come alive. If you enjoy inspiring romance, powerful drama, and stories that restore faith in humanity, subscribe and join our growing family. Now, let's begin today's story. The cold rain soaked Stella's navy blue nursing uniform within seconds. She stood silently beneath the dim glow of a street lamp, watching the bus disappear into the busy streets of Seoul. Her heart pounded, not because of the rain, not because she was cold, but because she still couldn't understand what had just happened. She replayed every moment in her mind. She had boarded the bus after finishing a 12-hour shift at the International Medical Center, where she had worked for only 3 months. Exhausted from caring for patients, she had quietly tapped her transportation card, greeted the driver with a polite bow, and walked toward the back of the bus. She hadn't spoken loudly. She hadn't argued with anyone. She hadn't broken any rules. Yet minutes later, the driver had stopped the bus and told her to leave. The whispers from the passengers still echoed in her ears. "Why is she here? I don't feel comfortable. Maybe she doesn't belong." Every word felt like another weight on her heart. As tears threatened to fall, she quickly wiped them away. "No," she whispered to herself. "I didn't come all the way from Nigeria to give up." Back home in Kaduna, her widowed mother had hugged her tightly before she left. "Stella," she had said, "people may judge you before they know you. Don't let their opinions become your identity. Let your character speak louder than their prejudice." Those words had carried Stella through every difficult day since arriving in Korea. She took a deep breath. Then she noticed a man standing beside her. He had left the bus without hesitation. His tailored black overcoat was now wet from the rain, but he didn't seem to care. Instead, he quietly held an umbrella over both of them. "You'll catch a cold," he said in calm, gentle English. Stella looked up in surprise. "You got off because of me?" The man smiled faintly. "I got off because what happened wasn't right." For the first time that evening, Stella felt that someone truly saw her, not as a stranger, not as an outsider, but as a human being. She lowered her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "You didn't have to do that." He extended his hand. "My name is Han Ji-hoon." She shook it. "I'm Stella." Neither of them realized that the simple handshake, under a shared umbrella on a rainy Seoul night, was the beginning of a story that would capture headlines across the country and change both of their lives forever. As they stood there, a black luxury sedan slowly turned the corner. The driver slammed on the brakes the moment he recognized the man under the umbrella. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Chairman Han?" he whispered. The night was only just beginning. The black luxury sedan rolled to a smooth stop beside the curb. A middle-aged man in a dark suit hurried out, holding another umbrella. The moment he reached them, he bowed deeply. "Chairman Han," he said respectfully, "we've been looking for you everywhere. The board members are waiting." Stella froze. "Chairman?" She looked from the suited man to Han Ji-hoon, who sighed as though he had hoped to avoid being found. "I told you I needed a few minutes alone," Ji-hoon said calmly. "I'm sorry, sir," the assistant replied. "But tonight's meeting concerns the acquisition of Mafia International Medical Group. They cannot begin without you." Stella's eyes widened. Mafia International Medical Group. That was the very hospital where she worked. She suddenly felt embarrassed. She had been standing in the rain talking to one of the most powerful men in the country's healthcare industry without realizing who he was. I'm sorry," she stammered. If I'd known who you were, I wouldn't have taken so much of your time. Ji-hoon smiled gently. And if I'd introduced myself that way, you might never have spoken to me honestly. His answer caught her off guard. For the first time that evening, Stella laughed, a quiet laugh that surprised even her. Ji-hoon noticed a sadness slowly lifting from her face. Where do you live? He asked. A small apartment near Mapo, Stella replied. Then let us make sure you get home safely. Before she could protest, the assistant stepped forward and opened the rear door of the sedan. Please, miss. Stella hesitated. Back home. Her mother had always warned her not to trust strangers simply because they appeared kind or wealthy. She looked at Ji-hoon. His expression was patient. There was no pressure, no expectation. You don't have to, he said. The choice is yours. That simple sentence reassured her more than any grand gesture could have. She nodded. Thank you. As the car glided through Seoul's glittering streets, Stella gazed out at the city lights reflecting on the rain-soaked roads. She had dreamed of Korea as a place where hard work alone would determine her future. The events on the bus had shaken that dream. Yet sitting beside Ji-hoon reminded her that compassion could also be found in unexpected places. Neither of them noticed that a motorcyclist several cars behind had been following the sedan ever since it left the bus stop. The rider raised a camera with a long lens. The shutter clicked several times. By the next morning, photographs of Han Ji-hoon, the country's most eligible billionaire, sitting beside an unknown Nigerian nurse would begin spreading online. And with them would come curiosity, rumors, admiration, and powerful enemies determined to keep the two of them apart. The following morning, Stella woke before dawn. Her small apartment was simple but tidy. A narrow bed, a tiny dining table, a bookshelf filled with nursing textbooks, and a framed photograph of her mother and younger brother in Nigeria. She smiled at the picture. Good morning, Mama, she whispered. After saying a short prayer, she put on her neatly pressed nursing uniform and left for the hospital. She had no idea that while she was walking to work, her face was already spreading across the internet. Inside Han Group's headquarters, executives sat around a polished conference table, waiting nervously. The atmosphere changed the moment Han Ji-hoon entered. He apologized briefly for arriving late and immediately focused on the meeting. As CEO, he was known for making quick, thoughtful decisions. His employees admired him because he cared about patients as much as profits. But halfway through the presentation, his assistant's phone vibrated. The assistant's face turned pale. Sir, Ji-hoon looked up. What is it? The assistant quietly placed a tablet on the table. Across every major entertainment and business news site was the same headline. Mysterious woman seen with billionaire CEO Han Ji-hoon after late-night incident. The accompanying photo showed Ji-hoon holding an umbrella over Stella at the bus stop. Another image captured them sitting within hours. The pictures had gone viral. Some comments praised Ji-hoon for standing beside someone who had been treated unfairly. Others spread wild rumors, claiming Stella was secretly dating the billionaire or using him for fame. A few comments were openly racist and cruel. Ji-hoon's eyes darkened as he read them. He wasn't angry because people were talking about him. He was angry because an innocent woman was being attacked for simply existing. He turned to his public relations director. Find out who leaked those photographs. Yes, sir. And issue a statement. The executives waited. What should we say? Ji-hoon answered without hesitation. The truth. Meanwhile, Stella walked into the hospital unaware of the storm waiting for her. As soon as she entered the nurse's station, conversation stopped. Several colleagues stared at her. Some looked surprised. Others looked uncomfortable. Her closest co-worker, Kim Soo-jin, hurried over. Stella, have you checked your phone? No, Stella replied. Why? Soo-jin handed her a tablet. The moment Stella saw the headline, her heart skipped a beat. Her hands trembled. I never wanted this. Before Soo-jin could respond, the head nurse stepped into the room. Stella bellowed. Yes, ma'am. The hospital director wants to see you immediately. The hallway suddenly felt much longer than usual. Every step echoed through the silent corridor. Stella had worked so hard to build a good reputation. Now she feared that one unexpected encounter might cost her everything. As she reached the director's office, she took a deep breath and knocked gently. "Come in." She opened the door. The director wasn't alone. Sitting calmly across from him was Han Ji-hoon. He stood as soon as Stella entered. His expression was steady, but his eyes revealed concern. "Stella," he said softly, "I'm sorry. I think my world has just made your life much more difficult." Stella looked at him in stunned silence, wondering why one rainy evening had suddenly turned her quiet life into the biggest story in Seoul. Stella stood frozen at the entrance of the director's office. Han Ji-hoon rose from his chair. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I never wanted you to be dragged into this." Before Stella could answer, the hospital director cleared his throat. "Miss Stella, please have a seat." She sat down carefully, her heart racing. The director folded his hands. "First, let me make one thing clear." Stella held her breath. "You are not in trouble." The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. "We've reviewed the security footage from yesterday evening," the director continued. "Several passengers have already confirmed that you did absolutely nothing wrong on that bus." Stella closed her eyes for a moment. For the first time since the incident, someone in authority had believed her. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. The director nodded. However, the room fell silent again. Since those photographs went viral, reporters have gathered outside the hospital. Some patients have started asking questions, and social media is full of rumors. Stella lowered her gaze. "I never wanted any of this." "I know," the director replied kindly. "That's why we've arranged for additional security until things settle down." June finally spoke. "This happened because I stood beside you." He looked directly into Stella's eyes. "I won't allow you to face the consequences alone." Stella was surprised by the firmness in his voice. She had met this man less than 24 hours earlier, yet he spoke as though protecting her was already his responsibility. Just then, there was a knock at the door. The director's assistant rushed inside, looking alarmed. "Sir, what is it?" "The reporters have discovered Miss Stella is here." Everyone turned toward the window. Dozens of cameras were pointed at the hospital entrance. News vans lined the street. Journalists shouted questions at anyone walking through the doors. Flashes from cameras lit up the gray morning sky. Stella's heart sank. "They're here because of me?" June walked to the window and quietly watched the scene below. Then he made a decision. He turned back to the director. "I'll face them." The director looked surprised. "Are you sure?" Ji-hoon nodded. "They're looking for answers. I'll give them the truth." He glanced at Stella. "But only if she's comfortable with it." Stella looked at the crowd outside. Fear filled her heart. She had come to Korea to care for patients, not to become the center of a national media storm. Yet she also knew that hiding forever would only fuel more rumors. Taking a slow, steady breath, she looked at Ji-hoon. "If we tell the truth," she asked softly, "do you think people will believe us?" Ji-hoon gave a calm smile. "I don't know if everyone will." He paused. "But I know the truth is worth telling." With those words, the two of them walked toward a hospital entrance together, unaware that someone hidden among the reporters had a very different plan. One that would threaten not only Ji-hoon's reputation, but Stella's future in Korea. The automatic glass door slid open. A wave of flashing cameras lit up the hospital entrance. "Chairman Han, who is the woman beside you? Are you two dating? Did you know her before yesterday? Is this a publicity stunt?" The questions came one after another. Hospital security quickly formed a line to keep the crowd from pushing forward. Stella instinctively stepped back. She had never experienced anything like this. In Nigeria, she had dreamed of becoming a respected nurse, not someone whose face appeared on national television. Han Ji-hoon noticed her discomfort. Without touching her, he moved slightly closer, placing himself between Stella and the crowd. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. He wasn't trying to hide her. He was trying to protect her. A microphone was placed in front of him. "Chairman Han, what is your relationship with Miss Stella?" Ji-hoon answered calmly. "The young woman standing beside me is Stella, a professional nurse at this hospital." The reporters became even more curious. "We met for the first time yesterday evening." A murmur spread through the crowd. "She was treated unfairly on a public bus." I witnessed what happened, and I chose to stand beside her because no one deserves to be humiliated. Silence fell. I did not leave the bus because she is Nigerian. I left because she was a human being who deserved respect. For a brief moment, even the reporters stopped asking questions. Then applause broke out. Not from the journalists, but from patients and visitors who had gathered near the entrance. Some people nodded in agreement. Others wiped away tears. Stella looked at Ji-hoon in disbelief. No one had ever defended her so publicly before. But just as the atmosphere began to calm, a sharp voice cut through the crowd. So you're saying discrimination doesn't exist? Everyone turned. A woman in an expensive cream-colored suit stepped forward from a black luxury car that had just arrived. She removed her sunglasses slowly. The reporters immediately recognized her. Vice Chairwoman Han. It was Han So-yoon, Ji-hoon's older cousin, and a powerful executive within Han Group. Unlike Ji-hoon, she believed that reputation mattered more than compassion. Her eyes settled on Stella. Cold, calculating. Then she looked at Ji-hoon. Our family name is on every front page this morning, she said. And you're standing here defending a woman you've known for less than a day. Ji-hoon remained composed. I am defending what is right. Seo-yoon smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then don't be surprised when your kindness costs you more than you expected. She turned and walked back toward her car. Before getting in, she looked at Stella one last time. That look sent a chill down Stella's spine. She realized this wasn't just about a misunderstanding on a bus anymore. Someone powerful had decided she was a threat. And from that moment on, Stella knew her greatest challenge in Korea had only just begun. The crowd slowly began to disperse. Television reporters wrapped up their live broadcasts, while hospital staff returned to their duties. But Stella couldn't shake the uneasy feeling left by Han So-yoon's cold stare. It wasn't anger she had seen. It was calculation. The kind of look that belonged to someone already planning their next move. Inside the hospital, Ji-hoon walked Stella to the nurse's lounge. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Stella looked at him. You keep apologizing for something that wasn't your fault. Ji-hoon smiled faintly. Maybe, but I know my family. He paused before continuing. My cousin doesn't make empty threats. Stella folded her arms. Then maybe I should resign. Ji-hoon's expression changed immediately. What? If my presence is causing problems for you in the hospital? No. His answer came so quickly that even Stella was surprised. You earned your position here. You worked for it. No one has the right to take that away from you. His voice was calm, but full of conviction. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Stella smiled softly. Thank you. Meanwhile, on the top floor of Han Group headquarters, Han So-yoon stood in her luxurious office overlooking the Seoul skyline. She tossed a newspaper onto her desk. Across the front page was a large photograph of Ji-hoon standing beside Stella under the hospital entrance. The headline read, Billionaire CEO defends Nigerian nurse against public humiliation. Seo-yoon frowned. This is exactly what I feared. Her assistant entered. You wanted to see me, ma'am? She nodded. I want everything. Everything. I want Stella's employment records, her immigration history, her family background, every detail. The assistant hesitated. Ma'am, are we investigating her because we suspect she's done something wrong? Seo-yoon slowly looked up. No. Then why? Because if I can't find a weakness, she picked up the newspaper again. I'll create one. That evening, Stella finished another long shift. She was changing out of her uniform when Nurse Kim Soo-jin rushed into the locker room. Stella, what happened? You have a visitor. A visitor? Yes. He insists on waiting outside. Curious, Stella walked to the hospital entrance. There stood Han Ji-hoon, not in an expensive suit, not surrounded by bodyguards, just wearing a simple navy sweater and jeans, holding 2 paper cups of hot chocolate. He smiled as soon as he saw her. I thought you might need something warm after today. Stella couldn't help but laugh. Hot chocolate. I wasn't sure if you liked coffee. She accepted the cup. It's perfect. For the first time since arriving in Korea, Stella felt like she wasn't facing everything alone. As they began walking through a quiet park, talking about their childhoods, dreams, and families, someone watched from a distance. Hidden behind a row of trees, a man raised a camera. Click. Another photograph. Then another. He immediately sent the images to an unknown number. A reply came seconds later. Good. Keep following them. This is only the beginning. Unaware they were being watched, Stella and Ji-hoon continued walking beneath the glowing streetlights. Neither of them realized that an invisible enemy had just declared war. Not with violence, but with secrets, lies, and a plan that could destroy both their lives. The evening breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers through the quiet park. For the first time in days, Stella felt at peace. She sipped her hot chocolate and smiled. I never imagined Seoul could be this beautiful. Ji-hoon looked at the city lights, reflecting on the Han River. When I was a child, I used to come here with my father. You were close to him? He nodded. Very. He always told me that a person's true character isn't revealed when life is easy. It's revealed by how they treat people who can do nothing for them. Stella smiled. He sounded like my mother. Ji-hoon chuckled. Maybe that's why we understand each other. The conversation flowed naturally. They spoke about their childhoods, their dreams, and the sacrifices they had made to reach where they were. Stella shared how she had worked night shifts in Nigeria to save enough money for international nursing exams. Ji-hoon admitted that despite his wealth, he often felt lonely because many people treated him differently once they discovered who he was. For a moment, neither of them was thinking about headlines, reporters, or the scandal. They were simply two people getting to know each other. The next morning, Stella arrived at the hospital much earlier than usual. As she walked through the lobby, she noticed several nurses whispering. When she approached, the room fell silent. Her heart sank. She knew that silence. It was a silence people use when they had been talking about someone. Nurse Kim Soo-jin hurried toward her. Stella, don't look at your phone. Stella frowned. What happened now? Soo-jin hesitated. You should hear it from me first. She handed Stella a tablet. Across social media was a new headline. Billionaire CEO's secret romance deepens. Hospital nurse seen on late night date. The article showed photographs of Stella and Ji-hoon walking to the park, laughing and holding cups of hot chocolate. The story was filled with speculation. It claimed Stella had deliberately attracted Ji-hoon's attention to advance her career. Not a single claim was supported by evidence. Stella felt her stomach tighten. This isn't true. I know, Soo-jin replied. But millions of people have already seen it. At Han Group headquarters, Ji-hoon stared at the same article. His jaw tightened. This has gone too far. His assistant nodded. Our legal team has identified the website that first published the story. It's notorious for spreading false rumors. File a lawsuit, Ji-hoon said firmly, and issue a statement making it clear that Stella is not responsible for any of this. Immediately, sir. As the assistant turned to leave, Ji-hoon added one more instruction, and increase security around the hospital. The assistant looked surprised. Do you believe she's in danger? Ji-hoon gazed out the window. I don't know, but someone is following us. That afternoon, Stella finished checking on an elderly patient who had just undergone surgery. As she stepped into the corridor, she noticed a little girl sitting alone outside another hospital room. The child couldn't have been older than 7. She was crying quietly, clutching a worn teddy bear. Stella knelt beside her. Hello. The little girl looked up with tear-filled eyes. Are you lost? The child shook her head. My mommy is having surgery. I'm scared. Stella smiled gently. She took a small paper crane from her pocket, something she had learned to fold during her first month in Korea. My mother used to tell me that every paper crane carries a wish. She placed it in the little girl's hand. So let's make one together. The little girl smiled for the first time that day. Unbeknownst to Stella, someone standing at the end of the hallway had witnessed the entire moment. It was Han Ji-hoon. He hadn't come to see her. He had come for a meeting with the hospital board. But as he watched Stella comfort a frightened child with such genuine kindness, he realized something that had nothing to do with attraction, wealth, or the media. He admired the woman she was. And in that quiet hospital corridor, his heart took the first true step toward falling in love. Han Ji-hoon remained at the end of the corridor, unnoticed. He watched as Stella gently wiped the little girl's tears with a tissue. "You know," Stella said with a warm smile, "when I was your age, I used to be afraid whenever my mother went to the hospital too." The little girl looked up. "Really?" Stella nodded. "But every time, my mother came back to me with a smile." She pointed to the paper crane. "So let's believe your mommy will come back smiling too." The little girl hugged Stella tightly. "Thank you, Nurse Stella." At that exact moment, the operating room doors opened. A doctor walked out. The surgery was successful. The little girl's face lit up. She ran toward her father, who burst into tears of relief before repeatedly bowing to the doctors. Stella quietly smiled and slipped away, never expecting anyone to praise her. Ji-hoon watched everything. He realized she hadn't comforted the child because anyone was watching. She had done it simply because someone needed kindness. For the first time in years, he felt his heart soften in a way he couldn't explain. Later that afternoon, Ji-hoon was attending a board meeting. The directors discussed budgets, expansion plans, and international partnerships. But Ji-hoon's mind kept returning to the image of Stella folding that tiny paper crane. One director noticed his distraction. "Chairman Han." Ji-hoon looked up. "My apologies." The director continued. "We're also considering reducing funding for the hospital's charity program. It isn't generating profit." Several executives nodded in agreement. Ji-hoon slowly closed a file in front of him. "Who said healthcare exists only to generate profit?" The room fell silent. He stood. "A hospital is a business, yes. But it is also a place where hope is restored. If we abandon people simply because they cannot pay, then we have forgotten why this institution exists." His words filled the room. No one argued. The proposal to cut the charity program was quietly withdrawn. That evening, Stella prepared to leave the hospital. As she stepped outside, she noticed a small package resting on the reception desk. "Excuse me," she asked the receptionist. "Is this for me?" The receptionist nodded. "It was delivered about an hour ago." "There wasn't a sender?" "No." Stella thanked her and carried the package outside. It wasn't large, just a simple brown box tied with white string. She smiled. "Maybe Mama finally found a way to surprise me." She untied the ribbon carefully. Inside was another small box. When she opened it, her smile vanished. There was no gift, no letter, only a single photograph. It was the picture taken of her and Ji-hoon walking through the park. Across the photograph, someone had written 3 words in thick red ink. "Go home now." Her hands began to tremble. Before she could react, her phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. With a shaky voice, she answered, "Hello." For several seconds, silence. Then a calm, cold voice spoke. "This is your first warning, Stella. If you value your life, stay away from Han Ji-hoon." The line went dead. Stella stood frozen beneath the evening sky, the photograph slipping from her trembling hands as she realized this was no longer just a scandal. Someone wanted to frighten her into leaving Korea, and whoever was already knew exactly where to find her. The phone slipped from Stella's trembling hand. It hit the pavement with a dull thud. For several seconds, she couldn't move. The words echoed in her mind. "If you value your life, stay away from Han Ji-hoon." She looked around. People walked past as if nothing had happened. A young couple laughed while crossing the street. An elderly man waited patiently for the traffic light. A food vendor called customers to his stall. Everything looked normal. Yet Stella felt as though invisible eyes were watching her. She quickly picked up her phone and hurried toward the nearest taxi. 20 minutes later, she reached her apartment. She locked the door immediately. Then she checked every window, every curtain, every room. Nothing seemed out of place. She leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. "Maybe they're only trying to scare me," she whispered. But when she remembered the photograph inside the package, she knew this wasn't random. Someone had been following her. At that same moment, Han Ji-hoon was finishing dinner with his executive team. His assistant's phone rang. The assistant answered, listened carefully, then looked at Ji-hoon with concern. "Sir, what happened?" "Our security team intercepted footage from the hospital." Ji-hoon's expression hardened. "What kind of footage?" They found someone placing a package at the reception desk. Can you identify the person? The assistant shook his head. The individual wore a cap, a face mask, and gloves. The cameras never captured a clear view. Ji-hoon stood immediately. Where's Stella now? We believe she's already home. Ji-hoon didn't hesitate. Take me there. Meanwhile, several kilometers away, inside a luxurious penthouse overlooking the Han River, Han Se-in stood before a wall of windows. A man in a dark suit entered the room. The warning has been delivered. Seo-yin didn't turn around. Did she look frightened? Yes. A faint smile crossed her face. Good. The man hesitated. Ma'am, with respect, don't you think this is going too far? Only then did Seo-yin face him. Her eyes were cold. I haven't harmed her. I've simply reminded her that some doors should never be opened. She walked toward her desk. If Stella leaves Korea on her own, this ends peacefully. And if she doesn't, So-yin picked up a silver pen and set it down again. Then circumstances may force her to. Rain began to fall once more. Stella stood by her apartment window, unable to sleep. She thought about calling her mother in Nigeria, but she stopped herself. If Mama heard the fear in her voice, she would worry endlessly. No, Stella whispered. I'll handle this. Just then, there was a knock on the door. 3 slow knocks. Her heart raced. She looked through the peephole. Standing outside was Han Ji-hoon. His hair and coat were soaked from rain. The moment Stella opened the door, he looked at her face and knew something was wrong. You've been crying, he said softly. Stella tried to deny it. I'm fine. Ji-hoon gently shook his head. No, you're not. For a moment, Stella stayed silent. Then she handed him the photograph with the red warning. Ji-hoon's face changed instantly. The calm expression he had worn all day disappeared. He looked at the message. Then at Stella. His voice became firm. This is no longer about rumors. He folded the photograph carefully and slipped it into his coat pocket. From this moment on, I won't let you face this alone. Neither of them noticed a black SUV parked across the street. Inside, someone lowered a pair of binoculars. A voice spoke quietly into a phone. They're together now. The reply came immediately. Good. Phase 2 begins tonight. The black SUV remained parked across the street. Its engine idled quietly beneath the steady rain. Inside, 2 men watched Stella's apartment through dark-tinted windows. One of them lowered his binoculars. Chairman Han just entered the building. The other picked up his phone. Inform Madam Se-in. A few seconds later, the reply arrived. Do not touch them. Let the media destroy them first. The man smiled. Understood. The SUV drove away without attracting attention. Inside the apartment, Stella placed 2 cups of hot tea on the small dining table. I'm sorry, she said softly. I don't have anything fancy to offer. Ji-hoon smiled. This is perfect. He looked around the apartment. It was modest but warm. A bookshelf filled with nursing books stood beside the window. Several framed photographs of Stella's family rested on a wooden shelf. One picture caught his attention. It showed Stella wearing her graduation gown, while her mother proudly stood beside her. You look happy, he said. Stella smiled. That was the day I became the first nurse in my family. My mother sold vegetables for years to pay my school fees. Ji-hoon studied the photograph. She must be very proud. She is. Stella's eyes became emotional. Everything I do is to make her sacrifices worthwhile. Ji-hoon nodded quietly. For the first time, he understood that Stella wasn't chasing wealth or fame. She had crossed continents because of love for her family and a desire to heal others. That realization made him admire her even more. Suddenly, Ji-hoon's phone rang. It was his chief of security. Sir, we've traced the package. What did you find? The box was purchased with cash from a convenience store. No fingerprints. No useful DNA. But what? We recovered traffic camera footage. Ji-hoon stood. The suspect didn't work alone. There was a second vehicle following Miss Stella from the hospital. Ji-hoon's expression darkened. So someone has been tracking her movements. Yes, sir. And we believe they're still watching. Ji-hoon walked toward the window. He carefully pulled back the curtain just enough to see outside. The street looked quiet. Too quiet. His instincts told him something wasn't right. He turned back to Stella. I don't think you should stay here tonight. Stella looked surprised. You mean leave my apartment? Just until we know who's behind this. She hesitated. This is my home. I know. And I promise you return. He paused before adding, but right now, your safety matters more than anything else. Stella looked around the apartment she had worked so hard to afford. She never imagined she might have to leave it, even for a night. After a long silence, she nodded. Okay. 30 minutes later, they quietly exited to the building's underground parking garage. A black sedan waited. As they pulled onto the road, neither of them noticed a motorcycle emerging from the shadows. The rider kept a careful distance. No headlights, no sudden movements, just enough space to avoid suspicion. He followed them through the sleeping streets of Seoul. As the city lights reflected on the wet pavement, the rider smiled beneath his helmet. He wasn't interested in Ji-hoon. His assignment was Stella, and before dawn, he intended to discover exactly where she was being taken. The black sedan drove through the quiet streets of Seoul. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Neither Stella nor Ji-hoon spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy with everything that had happened. After nearly 40 minutes, the car turned away from the city center and entered a quiet residential neighborhood lined with tall pine trees. Finally, it stopped in front of a beautiful but modest two-story house surrounded by a stone wall. Stella looked at Ji-hoon. Where are we? He smiled faintly. My father's house. You live here? Ji-hoon shook his head. No. After he passed away, I decided to keep it exactly as he left it. It's the one place very few people know about. Stella stepped out of the car and admired the peaceful garden. It felt nothing like the luxurious mansion she imagined a billionaire would own. Instead, it felt like a home. As they entered, an elderly woman appeared from the kitchen. Her silver hair was neatly tied back. She smiled warmly the moment she saw Ji-hoon. Young master. Ji-hoon bowed respectfully. It's good to see you again, Mrs. Park. Mrs. Park had worked for Ji-hoon's family for more than 30 years. To Ji-hoon, she wasn't just an employee. She was family. Her eyes turned to Stella. And who is this lovely young lady? Before Ji-hoon could answer, Stella bowed politely. My name is Stella. It's an honor to meet you. Mrs. Park smiled. You have wonderful manners. She gently held Stella's hands. They're freezing. Come inside. I've just made hot soup. For the first time since the nightmare had begun, Stella felt the warmth of genuine hospitality. While Stella and Mrs. Park spoke in the kitchen, Ji-hoon's chief of security entered through the back door. His face was serious. Sir, Ji-hoon led him into the study. What have you found? We confirmed someone followed your vehicle. Ji-hoon's eyes narrowed. Did they discover this location? We don't believe so. But there's something else. The security chief handed him a file. We investigated the bus incident. Ji-hoon opened it. His expression changed immediately. What is this? The driver. He didn't stop the bus on his own. Ji-hoon's heartbeat quickened. What do you mean? He received a phone call less than 2 minutes before forcing Miss Stella off the bus. Ji-hoon stared at the report. Can you trace the number? We tried. It was a disposable phone. The room fell silent. Ji-hoon slowly closed the file. This wasn't random. No, sir. The humiliation on that bus was planned. Across the city, Han So-yeon sat alone in her office. A television news report played silently in the background. She looked at an old photograph on her desk. It showed Ji-hoon and his late father smiling together years earlier. Her expression softened for only a moment, then it hardened again. She whispered to herself, I warned your father that kindness would make this family vulnerable. She placed the photograph face down. And now you're making the same mistake. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. Moved to the next stage. The voice on the other end asked, What about the nurse? So-yeon answered without hesitation. Don't touch her. Not yet. I want her to choose to walk away from Ji-hoon on her own. She ended the call. A slow smile crossed her face, because she had just set a trap, one designed not to hurt Stella physically, but to make her believe that staying near Ji-hoon would destroy everyone she loved. Far away, in the quiet safety of the old house, Stella had no idea that the greatest test of her courage was about to begin. The aroma of hot vegetable soup filled the dining room. Mrs. Park smiled as she placed another bowl in front of Stella. "Eat, my dear," she said kindly. "You look exhausted." Stella smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Mrs. Park." For the first time in days, she felt safe. The house was peaceful. The rain outside had slowed to a gentle drizzle. For a brief moment, it seemed as though all the chaos had been left behind. But peace has a way of disappearing when danger is patient. In the study, Ji-hoon was still reading the investigation report. The more he read, the more disturbing it became. His chief of security pointed to another page. "We interviewed several passengers from the bus, and 3 of them admitted they received anonymous text messages before boarding." Ji-hoon looked up sharply. "What kind of messages?" The security chief handed him a printed screenshot. "Be careful. A dangerous foreign woman is on your bus. Protect yourself." Ji-hoon's hands tightened around the paper. "They manipulated the passengers." "Yes, sir. They planted fear before Stella even stepped onto the bus." Ji-hoon closed his eyes for a moment. This wasn't prejudice that happened by chance. It was engineered. Someone had carefully created the entire incident. Meanwhile, Stella helped Mrs. Park wash the dishes. "You don't have to do that." Mrs. Park laughed. "In my home," Stella replied with a smile, "my mother always says that anyone who eats should help clean." Mrs. Park chuckled. "Your mother raised you well." As they talked, Mrs. Park noticed something. Stella's smile would appear for a few seconds, then quietly disappear. "You're worried," Mrs. Park said gently. Stella nodded. "I'm not afraid for myself. I'm afraid my presence is bringing trouble into other people's lives." Mrs. Park placed a comforting hand on Stella's shoulder. "Sometimes, kind people blame themselves for storms they never created." She smiled warmly. "But remember this, the storm always belongs to the one who started it, not to the one caught in the rain." Those words settled deep in Stella's heart. The next morning, a knock echoed through the house. One of Ji-hoon's security officers opened the gate. Standing outside was a courier. "I have a delivery for Miss Stella." The officer frowned. "Who sent it?" "I don't know. There wasn't a return address." The package was immediately scanned. No explosives. No dangerous chemicals. Only a small envelope inside. Ji-hoon insisted on opening it first. Inside was a single handwritten letter. There was no signature. Only one sentence. "Ask your mother in Nigeria if she made it home safely yesterday." Stella's face turned pale. "My mother?" Her hands shook as she reached for her phone. She called immediately. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. Her breathing became uneven. What if something happened? Ji-hoon gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We don't know that anything has happened, but we'll find out." He turned to his security chief. "Contact our international office. I want someone to verify that Stella's family is safe. Right now." The chief nodded and hurried away. Minutes felt like hours. Every second of silence increased Stella's fear. Then, the chief returned. "They're safe." Stella nearly collapsed with relief. "We spoke to a neighbor. Your mother went to the local market this morning. She left her phone at home by accident." Tears filled Stella's eyes. She whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. But Ji-hoon wasn't relieved. He stared at the anonymous letter. Whoever sent it had known enough about Stella's family to frighten her. That meant the enemy had gone beyond Seoul. Someone had begun digging into her life in Nigeria. Ji-hoon folded the letter carefully. His voice was calm, but determined. "They've crossed a line." He looked toward the window. "No more waiting. It's time we find out who is truly behind this, before they make their next move." The atmosphere inside the old house changed completely. This was no longer just about protecting Stella. It was about uncovering the truth. Ji-hoon gathered a security team in the study. A large digital screen displayed photographs. phone records, CCTV images, and newspaper headlines. Every piece of information was connected by a single question. Who was targeting Stella, and why? The chief investigator pointed to the screen. We've identified 3 key events. He clicked a remote. The bus incident. Another click. The anonymous photographs. Another. The threats delivered to Miss Stella. He looked at Ji-hoon. None of these appeared to be random. Ji-hoon folded his arms. So, what do you think? The investigator took a deep breath. I don't believe Miss Stella is the real target. The room fell silent. Ji-hoon frowned. Explain. The plan began only after you witnessed what happened on the bus. He pointed to a timeline. If you had stayed on the bus, none of this would have happened. Ji-hoon stared at the screen. The realization hit him hard. They wanted me involved. Exactly. The investigator nodded. Someone expected you to defend her. And once you did, both of you became part of the same trap. At the same time, Stella sat in the garden with Mrs. Park. The morning sun had finally broken through the clouds. Birds sang from the pine trees. For a few peaceful moments, the world felt normal again. Mrs. Park poured tea into 2 small cups. My husband used to say something, she began. What was that? When people throw stones at a tree, it's usually because the tree is carrying fruit. Stella smiled. In Nigeria, we have a similar saying. Mrs. Park laughed. Then wisdom must travel farther than people do. Both women shared a quiet laugh. But Stella's smile faded. What if all of this never ends? Mrs. Park looked at her kindly. It will. How can you be so sure? Because lies can run very fast. She gently covered Stella's hand. But the truth never gets tired. Back inside the study, Ji-hoon's assistant rushed in. Sir. Everyone turned. We've traced the disposable phone used to call the bus driver. Ji-hoon stood immediately. Where? It was activated only once. And it connected to a cell tower less than 500 meters from Han Group headquarters. The room became silent. Ji-hoon's eyes narrowed. Someone inside my company? We can't confirm that yet. But whoever planned this was operating very close to your office. Ji-hoon slowly looked at the company organizational chart hanging on the wall. For the first time, he realized the enemy might not be outside his company. The enemy could already be inside it. And if that was true, then trusting the wrong person could cost Stella her life. The study fell into complete silence. Ji-hoon stared at the map on the screen. The red marker blinked just a few hundred meters from Han Group headquarters. His chief investigator broke the silence. Sir, if we're right, this wasn't organized by someone on the outside. Ji-hoon nodded slowly. It means whoever's behind this understands my schedule, my company, and possibly even my security. He turned toward everyone in the room. From this moment on, no one outside this team is to know where Stella is staying. Everyone agreed. One careless word could put Stella in danger again. Later that afternoon, Ji-hoon decided to return to headquarters. Before leaving, he found Stella in the garden watering Mrs. Park's flowers. The sunlight reflected across the small pond nearby. For the first time since they had met, Stella looked genuinely relaxed. I have to go to the office, Ji-hoon said. Stella nodded. I understand. I'll be back before dinner. She smiled. You don't have to rush because of me. Ji-hoon smiled back. I know. He paused. But I'd rather come back to good company than another board meeting. Stella laughed softly. Then I'll ask Mrs. Park to save you some soup. For a brief moment, the fear disappeared. It felt almost normal. As Ji-hoon's car pulled away, neither of them noticed a drone flying high above the trees. It hovered for only a few seconds. Its tiny camera captured clear images of the house and the black sedan leaving the gate. Miles away, the live video appeared on a computer screen. A man wearing black gloves smiled. So, we found the safe house. He immediately encrypted the footage and sent it to a private email address. Within minutes, Han So-yeon received it. She watched the video without showing any emotion. So that's where you've been hiding her. She closed the laptop. I was hoping you would lead me there yourself, Ji-hoon. Back at Han Group headquarters, Ji-hoon entered the executive floor. The conversation stopped as soon as employees saw him. Everyone had read the headlines. Everyone knew about the scandal. Inside the boardroom, several directors were already waiting. One elderly director spoke first. Chairman Han, we need to discuss the impact this controversy is having on the company. Ji-hoon remained calm. What impact? The media attention is affecting investor confidence. Another director added, some shareholders believe your personal involvement with Nurse Stella is becoming a distraction. Ji-hoon looked around the room. Then he asked one simple question. Has the company's performance declined? The finance director checked his report. No. Have we lost any major contracts? No. Have our hospitals stopped treating patients? Of course not. Ji-hoon folded the report and placed it on the table. Then this isn't a business discussion. It's gossip. The room fell silent. Several directors lowered their eyes. Just then, the boardroom doors opened. Han Seo-yin walked in. Elegant, confident, completely uninvited. She smiled at Ji-hoon. Cousin, I think it's time we stop pretending this is only about business. She placed a thick folder on the table. I brought something I think you'll want to see. Ji-hoon looked at the folder. What is it? Seo-yin smiled again. A secret from Stella's past. Across the room, every director leaned forward. Ji-hoon's expression remained calm, but inside, he knew this could be the moment everything changed. He also knew one thing with certainty. He would not judge Stella based on rumors. He would first learn the truth. The boardroom became so quiet that the sound of the air conditioner filled the room. Han Seo-yin gently pushed the folder across the polished table. It took my team less than 48 hours to gather this information. Ji-hoon didn't touch it. Instead, he looked directly at her. How did you obtain a private file on someone who isn't even employed by Han Group? Seo-yin smiled. I have my ways. Several directors exchanged uneasy glances. Ji-hoon finally opened the folder. Inside were copies of Stella's nursing certificates, immigration documents, and photographs from her university days in Nigeria. Nothing unusual. Then he reached the final page. It was a newspaper clipping from several years earlier. The headline read, Young nurse investigated after medication error at community clinic. One of the directors gasped. Another whispered, so she has a history. Ji-hoon continued reading. He noticed something the others had missed. At the bottom of the article, in much smaller print, was a follow-up note. The investigation later cleared Nurse Stella of all wrongdoing. The medication had been incorrectly labeled by the supplier. Ji-hoon closed the folder. His expression remained calm. Did everyone read the last paragraph? The directors looked confused. He turned the newspaper clipping around so everyone could see it. She was cleared. No charges. No misconduct. No disciplinary action. The room fell silent. Seo-yun's smile faded for the first time. You conveniently left out the conclusion, Ji-hoon said. I wanted everyone to assume she was guilty. Seo-yun folded her arms. People remember headlines, not corrections. Ji-hoon's voice became firm. Then perhaps it's time we stop rewarding people who rely on half the truth. The directors lowered their eyes, embarrassed that they had jumped to conclusions. That afternoon, Stella helped Mrs. Park trim flowers in the garden. She had no idea that her past had just been discussed in a corporate boardroom. Mrs. Park noticed Stella looking at the roses. They're beautiful. Stella smiled. My mother loves roses. When I have enough money, I want to plant a whole garden for her. Mrs. Park looked at Stella warmly. You think about your family every day, don't you? Every single day. Just then, Stella's phone rang. It was her younger brother, Daniel. She answered immediately. Daniel. His cheerful voice filled the line. Big sister. Mama finally found her phone. Stella laughed with relief. I was so worried. We're all fine, Dan replied. Mama says you should stop worrying about us and take care of yourself. Stella smiled through tears. I'll try. After the call ended, she looked up at the sky for the first time in days. She felt hope back in Seoul. Ji-hoon was leaving the boardroom when his chief investigator rushed toward him. Sir, what is it? We've identified the man who delivered the threatening package. Ji-hoon's eyes sharpened. Who is he? A former private investigator. He disappeared 6 years ago. And he recently started working for a consulting firm. The investigator paused. Ji-hoon noticed the hesitation. Which consulting firm? The investigator swallowed hard. The firm is owned through several shell companies, but we've traced the money. It all leads back to someone connected to Han Group. Ji-hoon felt a chill. This was no longer suspicion. For the first time, they had a trail, and if they followed it carefully, it might finally lead them to the person who had been manipulating everything from the very beginning. Ji-hoon closed the office door behind him. Only 3 people remained in the room. His chief investigator, his personal assistant, the head of corporate security. No one else hears this conversation. Ji-hoon said firmly. Everyone nodded. The investigator placed several documents on the table. We followed the financial trail. He pointed to a diagram. The private investigator received payments from a consulting company. That consulting company received money from another corporation. And that corporation is funded through an investment account connected to Han Group. Ji-hoon's face remained expressionless. So the money was deliberately hidden. Yes, sir. This wasn't amateur work. Someone had spent months creating fake companies to hide their identity. Meanwhile, at the safe house, Stella helped Mrs. Park prepare lunch. As they chopped vegetables together, Mrs. Park smiled. You know, I haven't seen young Master Ji-hoon smile this much in years. Stella looked surprised. Really? Mrs. Park nodded. After his father passed away, he buried himself in work. He stopped celebrating birthdays. He stopped taking holidays. He even stopped playing the piano. The piano? Mrs. Park pointed toward the living room. In that corner, Stella turned and noticed a beautiful grand piano she hadn't paid attention to before. It belonged to his father. He hasn't touched it in almost 5 years. Stella walked over quietly. Her fingers rested gently on the polished wood. He must miss him very much. Mrs. Park sighed, more than he ever admits. Late that evening, Ji-hoon finally returned. He looked exhausted. Dark circles had formed beneath his eyes. You've been working all day, Stella said with concern. Ji-hoon smiled. And you can tell just by looking at me? She laughed softly. Nurses notice everything. Mrs. Park excused herself, leaving the 2 of them alone in the living room. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence was peaceful. Then Stella looked toward the piano. Mrs. Park told me it belonged to your father. Ji-hoon's eyes followed hers. Yes. Do you play? I used to. Why did you stop? He was quiet for several seconds. Because every song reminded me of him. Stella understood. She knew grief often silenced the things people once loved. Without saying another word, she sat down at the piano bench. I only know one simple melody, she admitted. My mother taught it to me when I was a little girl. She pressed the first key. A soft, gentle tune filled the room. It wasn't perfect, but it was sincere. Ji-hoon closed his eyes. The music carried him back to childhood evenings when his father would sit beside him, teaching him the same patience he now tried to show others. When the melody ended, the room was silent. Ji-hoon opened his eyes. Thank you. Stella smiled. For what? For reminding me that memories don't only bring pain. At that moment, Mrs. Park quietly watched from the hallway. A tear rolled down her cheek. It was the first time she had seen Ji-hoon truly at peace since his father's death, but that peaceful moment didn't last. Ji-hoon's phone rang. His chief investigator sounded urgent. Sir, we've uncovered something alarming. What is it? The consulting firm wasn't created to target Miss Stella. Ji-hoon's expression hardened. Then what was its original purpose? The investigator took a deep breath. It has been secretly moving company money for years. What started as an attack on Stella may actually be covering up a much bigger corporate crime. Ji-hoon stood immediately. If the investigator was right, Stella hadn't been chosen because of who she was. She had been chosen because someone needed a distraction. And now, by standing beside her, Ji-hoon had accidentally uncovered conspiracy worth billions of won. One powerful people would do anything to keep buried. June stared out the window as the call ended. The room suddenly felt much colder. He turned toward Stella. "I'm sorry." She looked confused. "For what?" "I thought all of this was happening because of me." He paused. "But now I believe you've been pulled into something much bigger." Stella slowly stood. "I don't understand." Ji-hoon took a deep breath. "My company may have been hiding a financial crime for years. And somehow, your name became part of someone's plan." Stella was stunned. "A nurse? Why would anyone use me?" Ji-hoon shook his head. "That's exactly what we have to find out." The next morning, Ji-hoon and his security chief drove to a secure archive building owned by Han Group. Deep beneath the building was a records room that stored decades of financial documents. An elderly records manager greeted them. "Chairman Han, I received your request." He unlocked a heavy steel door. "If what you're looking for exists, it will be here." Rows of shelves stretched across the underground room. Thousands of files. Thousands of secrets. The investigator searched through old acquisition records while Ji-hoon reviewed documents connected to consulting company. Hours passed. Nothing. Then, the investigator suddenly stopped. "Sir." Ji-hoon looked up. "What is it?" The investigator held up a faded ledger. "It doesn't match the digital records." Ji-hoon took it carefully. Several pages had been removed. Others had been replaced. But one handwritten note remained in the margin. "Transfer approved by HSY." Ji-hoon's heartbeat quickened. HSY. Han Seo-yoon. He looked at the investigator. "Photograph every page. And don't tell anyone we found this." At the safe house, Stella was helping Mrs. Park arrange flowers when the doorbell rang. Mrs. Park frowned. "We're not expecting anyone." A security officer checked a monitor. "It's a young woman. She says she's from the hospital." Stella looked surprised. "From the hospital?" The officer opened the gate cautiously. A young nurse stepped inside, breathing heavily. "Stella." It was Kim Soo-jin. Stella rushed forward. "Soo-jin, what happened?" Soo-jin looked around nervously before speaking. "I couldn't call. I think someone has been listening to my phone." Stella's face grew serious. "What are you talking about?" Soo-jin reached into her handbag and pulled out a small flash drive. "I found this hidden inside one of the hospital's administrative computers." She handed it to Stella. "I don't know what's on it. But before the IT department could erase the files, I copied everything." At that moment, Ji-hoon's security officer stepped forward. "I'll take that." He inserted the flash drive into a secure laptop. The screen flickered. Folders appeared. Patient records, financial reports, internal emails. Then, one folder caught everyone's attention. Its name was simple. Project Starlight. The officer clicked it. Inside were hundreds of encrypted files. And at the very top, one document labeled, "Confidential. Do not share with Stella Bello." The room fell silent. Stella's breathing became uneven. She whispered, "My name. Why is my name in a confidential company file?" No one had an answer, but everyone knew they had just uncovered the first real clue to the mystery. And whatever Project Starlight was, it had begun long before Stella ever stepped onto that bus. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at the laptop screen. Ji-hoon's security officer looked at Stella. "Before we open this, you should know there may be things inside that are difficult to hear." Stella took a slow breath. "If this has my name on it, I want to know the truth." Ji-hoon nodded. "Open it." The officer clicked the file. A password prompt appeared. "Access restricted." The investigator smiled faintly. "I expected that." He connected a secure decryption device and began working. Minutes passed. No one spoke. Finally, access granted. A folder opened. Inside were several reports, photographs, and confidential emails. The first report was titled, "Potential Risks to Han Group's Healthcare Expansion." Ji-hoon frowned. "This doesn't make sense." He opened the document. It described plans to acquire several hospitals across Asia and Africa. Nothing unusual. Then he reached the final pages. His expression changed. "What is it?" Stella asked. Ji-hoon slowly turned the screen toward her. Attached to the report was a list of healthcare professionals from different countries who had received international job offers. Among hundreds of names, one stood out, Stella Bello. Beside her name was a handwritten note, high integrity, difficult to influence. Stella blinked. I've never seen this before. Ji-hoon kept reading. Another note appeared. If she refuses cooperation, remove her from the project. The room became silent again. Stella's voice trembled. What project? I don't even know what they're talking about. The investigator frowned. This file is at least 18 months old. Ji-hoon looked at Stella. You weren't even in Korea yet. She slowly shook her head. I was still working in Nigeria. Exactly. Ji-hoon closed the file. This means someone knew about you long before you accepted your position in Seoul. Mrs. Park stood in the doorway, unable to believe what she had heard. How could they know about Stella before she even came here? No one answered, because no one understood it. The investigator opened another document. This one contained emails between executives. Most names were hidden, but one sentence caught Ji-hoon's attention. She was selected because she cannot be bought. Ji-hoon leaned forward. That's not a threat. It's a compliment. He looked at Stella. They chose you because of your honesty. Stella was even more confused. But if they respected my honesty, why are they trying to destroy me? Before Ji-hoon could answer, a loud alarm suddenly echoed through the house. Beep, beep, beep. The security officer jumped to his feet. Perimeter breach. Everyone froze. Another officer rushed into the room. Sir, a vehicle has forced its way through the outer gate. June immediately stood between Stella and the front door. Get Mrs. Park to the safe room. Move Stella with her. Outside, the sound of tires screeched across the driveway. Then, crash! A black SUV slammed into the garden wall. Several masked men jumped out. One of them shouted, "Search the house." Ji-hoon's security team drew their weapons and moved into defensive positions. Inside the house, Stella's heart pounded. She had never imagined that the quiet nurse who came to Korea to save lives would one day find herself at the center of a conspiracy, with armed intruders at the door. And as the first window shattered downstairs, she realized one terrifying truth. The people behind Project Starlight were no longer hiding in the shadows. They had come for her. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the house. Mrs. Park gasped. One of the security officers quickly led her toward a reinforced safe room hidden behind a bookshelf. Mrs. Park, this way. Another officer turned to Stella. Miss Stella, please come with us. But Stella didn't move. Instead, she looked toward the front of the house where the guards were preparing to defend the entrance. They're going to get hurt, she whispered. June stepped in front of her. They're trained for this. And they're here to protect you. A loud bang shook the front door. The attackers were trying to force it open. The head of security spoke into his radio. Team Alpha, cover the front entrance. Team Bravo, secure the east side. No one enters this house. Outside, the masked men spread out across the property. One carried a heavy metal bar. Another held a crowbar. But something seemed strange. None of them appeared to be carrying firearms. The leader shouted, "Find the flash drive." Ji-hoon's eyes narrowed. The flash drive? He looked at the laptop on the table. They're not here for Stella. They're here for the evidence. The security chief nodded. That means the files are real. Suddenly, the electricity went out. The entire house was plunged into darkness. Mrs. Park cried out in fear. Emergency lights flickered on, casting a dim red glow through the hallways. Ji-hoon immediately reached for Stella's hand. Stay close to me. She nodded. Despite her fear, she noticed something unusual. One of the guards had been struck in the shoulder by flying glass. Blood soaked through his sleeve. Without thinking, Stella rushed toward him. Miss Stella, no, the officer shouted. But she was already kneeling beside the injured man. I'm a nurse, she said calmly. Let me help. She removed a clean scarf from her bag and pressed it firmly against the wound to stop the bleeding. Breathe slowly. You're going to be all right. Even under pressure, her voice remained steady. The injured officer looked at her in disbelief. You should be hiding. Stella smiled gently. I became a nurse to help people. I can't stop now. Ji-hoon watched from across the room. In the middle of danger, she still chose compassion. At that moment, he realized he wasn't just protecting Stella because she was innocent. He was protecting someone whose courage inspired everyone around her. Outside, the leader of the masked men received a phone call. We found the house. What about the flash drive? The voice asked. We're searching. There was a brief silence. Then the caller gave a chilling order. Forget the flash drive. Bring Stella. The masked man looked toward the house. So, the mission has changed. He raised his hand, moved to the back in trance. Inside, Ji-hoon's security chief looked at the surveillance monitor. His face turned pale. Sir, they're splitting up. Ji-hoon looked at the screen. Half of the attackers were no longer heading toward the study. They were moving around the side of the house, toward the safe room where Stella and Mrs. Park had been moments earlier. Ji-hoon understood instantly. They know the layout. Someone had given the attackers detailed information about the house, which meant the enemy wasn't just watching them anymore. The enemy had someone on the inside, and that betrayal could cost them everything. Ji-hoon's eyes remained fixed on the security monitor. The attackers moved with alarming precision. They avoided every camera's blind spot. They knew exactly where the emergency exits were, and they headed straight toward the rear corridor. His chief of security spoke in a tense voice. Sir, they've been here before. Ji-hoon slowly nodded. No, they've studied this house. Someone had given them detailed floor plans. The security team quickly repositioned. Team Alpha, protect the rear entrance. Team Bravo, stay with Miss Stella. Do not let anyone separate her from us. The officers acknowledged the orders and rushed into position. Stella noticed one young guard whose hands were trembling. He couldn't have been older than 25. She stepped closer. What's your name? Min Soo, he answered nervously. This is my first field assignment. Stella smiled reassuringly. Being afraid doesn't make you weak. It means you understand what's at stake. The young guard took a deep breath. Her words steadied him. Thank you. Outside, the masked leader raised his hand. Now! Two men climbed over the back wall, while another cut the security fence. But before they reached the house, powerful floodlights suddenly illuminated the entire garden. The attackers froze. A loud voice echoed through hidden speakers. This property is under police surveillance. Drop your weapons immediately. The men looked around in confusion. One whispered, Police? The leader frowned. No, it's a recording. But the few seconds of hesitation were enough. Ji-hoon's security officers moved swiftly. Within moments, they surrounded two of the intruders. The remaining attackers fled toward the wall. One escaped. Another was tackled to ground. The leader disappeared into the darkness. Minutes later, the police arrived with flashing lights and secured the property. Detectives questioned everyone. A senior detective approached Ji-hoon. Chairman Han, we've arrested two suspects. Have they spoken? The detective shook his head. They refused to answer any questions. As officers searched the suspects, one detective found a folded piece of paper hidden inside a jacket pocket. He handed it to Ji-hoon. What is it? Ji-hoon unfolded it. It wasn't a map. It wasn't a list of instructions. It was a photograph, a recent photograph. It showed Stella standing beside her mother and younger brother in Nigeria. Standing beside her mother and younger brother in Nigeria. The picture had clearly been taken months before she came to Korea. Stella's face lost all color. How? How did they get this? The detective looked disturbed. This wasn't downloaded from social media. It appears someone had physical access to your family. A heavy silence settled over everyone. Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. The danger had become far more personal than he had imagined. Just then, one of the arrested attackers suddenly began laughing. The officers looked at him in confusion. He raised his head and looked directly at Stella. You think this is over? No one answered. He smiled. You still don't know who Project Starlight was really created for. The detective stepped closer. What do you mean? The man laughed again. Then he said quietly, Stella Bello was never supposed to survive long enough to discover the truth. Before anyone could question him further, he collapsed to the ground. An ambulance crew rushed forward. The officers had not seen anyone approach him. No one knew why he had collapsed. As the paramedics worked to save him, Ji-hoon looked at Stella. The mystery had only deepened. Someone powerful was determined to silence every person who knew the truth. And now, Stella herself had become the key to a secret that reached far beyond Han Group, and perhaps even beyond South Korea. Move! The paramedics rushed the unconscious suspect into the ambulance. One of them checked his pulse. It's weak! Another quickly connected a heart monitor. Ji-hoon turned to Stella. Can you help? Without hesitation, Stella ran toward the ambulance. I'm a registered nurse. The lead paramedic recognized her hospital identification card. Come with us. Inside the ambulance, the suspect's breathing became shallow. The heart monitor sounded an urgent warning. Beep, beep, beep. He's crashing, one paramedic shouted. Stella immediately assessed the situation. Start chest compressions. She checked his airway while another medic prepared emergency equipment. For several tense moments, everyone worked together. Finally, the monitor showed a steady rhythm again. The paramedic let out a relieved breath. We've got him back. Ji-hoon, standing outside the ambulance, watched through the open doors. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. This man had come to kidnap Stella, yet she had fought to save his life. When she stepped out of the ambulance, Ji-hoon asked quietly, after everything he did, why did you save him? Stella looked at him with tired eyes. Because once I put on my uniform, I made a promise. I don't choose who deserves medical care. I simply do everything I can to save a life. Ji-hoon didn't reply immediately. Her answer reminded him why he had admired her from the very beginning. The suspect was taken under heavy police guard to a secure hospital. The detective approached Ji-hoon. Chairman Han, if he wakes up, he may finally tell us who's behind Project Starlight. Ji-hoon nodded. Assign officers to every entrance. No visitors. No exceptions. The detective agreed. Hours later, near dawn, Stella sat alone on the front steps of the safe house, wrapped in a blanket. She stared at the first rays of sunlight breaking through the trees. Ji-hoon quietly joined her, carrying 2 cups of warm tea. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. Finally, Stella broke the silence. Do you ever wish we'd never met? Ji-hoon looked at her in surprise. If you had stayed on that bus, none of this would have happened. Ji-hoon smiled gently. I've thought about that. And I always reach the same answer. What answer? He looked directly into her eyes. I would still get off that bus. Stella's eyes filled with tears. Even knowing everything that's happened? Yes. Why? Ji-hoon took a slow breath. Because some moments define the kind of person we become. If I had stayed seated while you faced that injustice alone, I don't think I could have respected myself ever again. A tear rolled down Stella's cheek. She quickly wiped it away. For the first time, she realized this wasn't simply gratitude drawing them together. It was something much deeper. Something neither of them was ready to name. Just then, Ji-hoon's phone rang. It was a detective. His voice was urgent. Chairman Han, the suspect is gone. Ji-hoon stood up immediately. What do you mean, gone? He disappeared from his hospital room. That's impossible. The security cameras went offline for exactly 90 seconds. When they came back, the room was empty. Ji-hoon's expression darkened. Someone had infiltrated a guarded hospital, disabled the surveillance system, and taken the only witness who could expose the truth. As he lowered the phone, he looked toward Stella. Whoever was behind Project Starlight wasn't just powerful. They were always one step ahead. And the hunt for the truth had just become far more dangerous. The morning calm disappeared instantly. Ji-hoon grabbed his car keys. We're leaving. The detective was still on the phone. Chairman Han, we've sealed every road within 5 kilometers of the hospital. And nothing. It's as if the kidnappers vanished into thin air. Ji-hoon's voice became firm. Don't assume he escaped. I believe someone took him. An hour later, Ji-hoon and Stella arrived at the hospital under police escort. The entire floor had been locked down. Detectives examined every corner of the room. Forensic officers dusted for fingerprints. The chief detective greeted them. "I've never seen anything like this." He pointed toward the security monitor. The cameras stopped recording at exactly 3:17 a.m. They resumed at 3 hours, 18 minutes, and 30 seconds. 90 seconds. That's all it took. Ji-hoon entered the room. The bed was empty. The floor line had been removed carefully. There was no sign of a struggle. Whoever had taken the witness knew exactly what they were doing. Stella walked slowly around the room. Something caught her attention. A faint smell lingered in the air. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then she turned to the detective. "Was anyone using strong disinfectant in this room?" The detective looked surprised. "No." "Why?" Stella walked closer to the bed. "This isn't ordinary disinfectant. It's a medical sterilizing solution." She pointed to a tiny wet mark on the floor. "We use this only in operating theaters." The detective immediately called a forensic technician. Minutes later, the technician returned. "She's right. We found traces of a surgical-grade sterilizing agent." Ji-hoon looked at Stella with admiration. "You noticed that just by the smell?" She nodded. "My training taught me to notice small details." The detective smiled. "You may have just given us our first real lead." At the same time, across the city, inside an abandoned warehouse, the missing witness slowly opened his eyes. His wrists were tied to a metal chair. The room was dark. A single light hung above him. Footsteps echoed. A figure emerged from the shadows. The witness tried to focus. His eyes widened. "You, I thought you were." The figure raised a finger to their lips. "Quiet." The witness lowered his head. "I never told him your name." "I swear." The mysterious figure spoke calmly. "I know. That's why you're still alive." The witness looked confused. "Then why bring me here?" The figure placed a thick envelope on the table. Inside was enough cash to change a person's life. "Leave South Korea. Never come back. And never speak about Project Starlight again." The witness hesitated. "And if I refuse?" The figure smiled. "You won't." The witness looked down at the money. His hands trembled. He knew accepting it meant living with guilt. Refusing it might mean never seeing another sunrise. Back at the hospital, a junior forensic officer hurried toward the detective. "Sir, what did you find?" The officer held up a tiny piece of black fabric caught beneath the hospital bed. It came from the kidnapper's clothing. The detective examined it carefully. Then his expression changed. "This isn't ordinary fabric." "What is it?" He looked at Ji-hoon. "It's part of a ceremonial jacket. The kind issued only to members of Han Group's private executive security division." The hallway fell silent. Ji-hoon couldn't believe what he had just heard. If the evidence was correct, the conspiracy had reached the highest levels of his own organization. Someone he trusted, someone who worked under his authority, was helping the enemy. And from that moment on, Ji-hoon realized he could no longer trust everyone wearing his company's badge. The detective carefully sealed the piece of black fabric inside an evidence bag. "No one outside this room is to know about this," he said. The forensic officer nodded. "If word gets out, whoever is responsible will destroy every remaining piece of evidence." Ji-hoon agreed. "From now on, we'll keep this investigation between a very small circle." He looked at the detective, then at Stella. "And we assume every phone call, every email, and every meeting could be monitored." On the drive back, neither Ji-hoon nor Stella spoke. The city moved around them as if nothing had happened. People hurried to work. Children laughed on their way to school. Street vendors opened their shops. It was strange how ordinary life could continue, while theirs had become so complicated. Finally, Stella broke the silence. "Ji-hoon." He looked at her. "What if I leave Korea?" He frowned. "If I go back to Nigeria? Maybe all of this will stop." Ji-hoon pulled the car over beside the Han River. He turned off the engine. Then he looked directly at her. "Do you truly believe that?" Stella didn't answer. He continued. "The people behind this knew your name before you ever came to Seoul. They contacted the bus driver. They threatened your family. If you leave now, You won't be escaping them. You'll only be running without knowing why they're chasing you. Stella lowered her eyes. Deep down, she knew he was right. That evening, Ji-hoon received an unexpected visitor at the safe house. It was his uncle, Han Sung-tae, one of the oldest members of the Han Group board. He was a calm, dignified man in his late 60s. After greeting everyone, he asked quietly, "May I speak with Ji-hoon alone?" They walked into the study. Han Sung-tae closed the door. "I've heard about the attacks." Ji-hoon nodded. "They're getting bolder." His uncle sighed. "There's something your father wanted you to know, but he believed the right time would come." Ji-hoon's expression changed. "What are you talking about?" The older man reached into his coat and removed a small brass key attached to a faded leather tag. He placed it on the desk. "Your father left this with me before he died." Ji-hoon stared at the key. "I've never seen it before. It opens a private vault." "Where?" His uncle hesitated. "A branch of Han National Bank." Ji-hoon's heartbeat quickened. "What's inside?" "I don't know. Your father never told me. He only said these words." The old man paused, remembering them exactly. "If darkness ever surrounds our family, give this key to Ji-hoon. The truth will already be waiting for him." The room fell silent. Ji-hoon slowly picked up the key. It felt surprisingly heavy in his hand. Could his father have known that one day a conspiracy would threaten the family? And if so, what truth had he hidden away all those years ago? Outside the study, Stella stood by the window, watching the evening sun disappear behind the mountains. She had no idea that the small brass key now resting in Ji-hoon's hand might unlock not only the mystery of Project Starlight, but also a secret capable of changing both their lives forever. Ji-hoon couldn't take his eyes off the brass key. It was old. Its edges were worn smooth from years of handling. On the leather tag attached to it were 4 faded words written in his father's handwriting. "For the right moment." Ji-hoon swallowed hard. His uncle stood quietly beside him. "I've carried that key for nearly 10 years, Han Sung-tae said. "I promised your father I would never give it to anyone else." Ji-hoon looked up. Why didn't he trust anyone? His uncle sighed. "Because he believed there were people inside Han Group who cared more about power than integrity. He never told me their names. But he always said, 'One day, my son will discover the truth.'" Early the next morning, before sunrise, Ji-hoon, Stella, the chief investigator, and Detective Kong arrived at Han National Bank. The bank manager was already waiting. "Good morning, Chairman Han." Ji-hoon handed him the brass key. "I need access to a private vault registered by my late father." The manager examined the key carefully. His expression changed. "I've only seen one of these before." He led them through several security checkpoints. Fingerprint scanners, retina verification, steel security doors. Finally, they reached a small underground chamber. In the center stood a single black safe deposit vault. The manager inserted his master key. Ji-hoon inserted his father's key. Click. The heavy lock slowly opened. No one spoke. Inside the vault was not gold, not cash, not jewelry. There were only 3 items: a thick sealed envelope, a leather-bound journal, and an old USB drive. Ji-hoon carefully picked up the envelope. Across the front, in his father's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "To my son, Han Ji-hoon." His hands trembled. For a moment, he couldn't bring himself to open it. Stella gently rested a hand on his arm. "It's okay." He nodded, then slowly broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. He began to read aloud. "My dear Ji-hoon, if you're reading this, it means I was right. The people I feared have finally revealed themselves." Everyone exchanged uneasy glances. Ji-hoon continued, "There are those within our company who believe lives are nothing more than numbers on a balance sheet. I spent years trying to stop them. I failed." The room was completely silent. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Project Starlight was never created to save lives. Ji-hoon's voice caught in his throat. He continued reading. "It was created to hide the deaths of innocent people." Stella covered her mouth in shock. Detective Kong looked at the chief investigator. Neither of them could believe what they were hearing. Ji-hoon slowly lowered the letter. His father had known. Years before his death, he had uncovered a terrible secret, and instead of exposing it publicly, he had hidden the evidence where only his son could find it. The leather journal and the old USB drive still remained inside the vault. If the letter was only the beginning, then whatever was stored on those two items could finally reveal who created Project Starlight and why Stella's name had become entangled in a conspiracy that had already claimed innocent lives. No one spoke. The underground vault felt colder than before. Ji-hoon slowly reached for the leather-bound journal. Its cover was faded with age. Inside the first page, written in elegant handwriting, were the words, "A leader who fears the truth does not deserve to lead. Han Min-jae." Ji-hoon smiled sadly. That was my father's favorite saying. He turned the page. The journal wasn't a diary. It was an investigation. Every page contained dates, names, financial records, meeting notes, and observations written over several years. His father had quietly documented everything. Detective Kong leaned closer. He was building a case. Ji-hoon nodded. Again, someone inside Han Group. The investigator carefully examined the next few pages. There are references to secret contracts, offshore accounts, medical procurement companies, and... He stopped. What? He pointed to a paragraph highlighted in red ink. Ji-hoon read it aloud. The project has expanded into several countries. Honest medical workers are becoming an obstacle because they refuse to sign false reports. Stella's heart skipped a beat. False reports. The detective looked at her. If someone wanted to hide wrongdoing in hospitals, they would need doctors and nurses willing to lie. Stella slowly shook her head. I would never do that. Ji-hoon looked at her. I know. The investigator continued reading. Your father wrote another note. Ji-hoon took the journal. His expression became serious. He read aloud. Those who cannot be bribed become targets. Some are transferred. Some are discredited. Some simply disappear. The room fell silent. Stella felt a chill run down her spine. She finally understood why the confidential file had described her as high integrity, difficult to influence. It wasn't praise. It was a warning. Ji-hoon then picked up the old USB drive. It still works. Detective Kong asked. We're about to find out. The investigator connected it to a secure forensic laptop. For a few 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then, a folder appeared. Its title read, Evidence, Final Copy. Inside were hundreds of scanned documents, signed contracts, financial transfers, internal emails, audio recordings, and one video file. Ji-hoon clicked on it. The screen came to life. It showed his father sitting alone in an office. He looked older than Ji-hoon remembered, tired, but determined. He looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this, then I was unable to stop them. Ji-hoon's eyes filled with tears. His father's voice continued. Ji-hoon, I never wanted you to carry this burden, but if the truth survives, our family may still have a chance to make things right. He paused, then said the words that stunned everyone in the room. Never blame Stella Bello. The room froze. Stella's eyes widened. Ji-hoon looked at the screen in disbelief. His father continued. If she has entered your life, it is not by accident. Years ago, I met a young Nigerian nursing student during a global medical ethics conference. She reminded me that compassion is stronger than power. Before we parted, she told me she had a daughter who dreamed of becoming a nurse. Ji-hoon's breathing slowed. He looked toward Stella. Her voice was barely a whisper. My mother, his father continued, if that young woman ever becomes a nurse her mother hoped she would be, that protect her. The video ended. Silence filled the vault. Tears rolled down Stella's face. She remembered her mother once telling her about attending a medical ethics event many years earlier, where she had met a kind Korean doctor who encouraged her never to lose hope. She had never known his name. Now, at last, the pieces fit together. Long before Stella and Ji-hoon met on that rainy bus in Seoul, their families' paths had already crossed. And what had seemed like a chance encounter might have been destiny waiting for the right moment. No one moved. The only sound inside the vault was Stella's quiet breathing as she tried to absorb what she had just learned. Ji-hoon replayed the final moments of the video. His father's voice echoed once more. Protect her. He slowly closed the laptop. I always believed my father chose his words carefully. He looked at Stella. Now I understand why. Stella wiped the tears from her cheeks. My mother never told me his name. She only said that one Korean doctor believed Africa deserved honest health care just as much as any other part of the world. Ji-hoon smiled sadly. That doctor was my father. For a long moment, they simply looked at one another. It felt as though two stories that had begun years apart had finally met. Detective Kong gently cleared his throat. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we found something else. Everyone turned. The investigator had opened another folder on the USB drive. It contained dozens of photographs. Some showed warehouses. Others showed shipping containers. Several displayed boxes of medical supplies. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Then Stella leaned closer. Wait! She pointed at one photograph. This label. The investigator zoomed in. Stella's expression became serious. This medicine expired 2 years before the photo was taken. Detective Kong frowned. You're certain? Yes. I've handled this medication many times. She pointed to the manufacturing code. The expiry date has been altered. The room fell silent. Ji-hoon looked at the photograph again. You're saying someone changed the labels? Stella nodded. If these medicines were distributed to hospitals, patients could have been placed in serious danger. The investigator quickly searched through the remaining files. Every photograph showed the same thing. Relabeled medicines, forged inspection certificates, false quality control reports. Ji-hoon's face hardened. So this is what Project Starlight really was. It wasn't just financial fraud. It endangered lives. Just then, the bank manager knocked gently on the vault door. Chairman Han. I'm sorry to interrupt. Ji-hoon looked up. What is it? You have a visitor. Ji-hoon frowned. I didn't tell anyone I was here. I know, sir. The manager hesitated. The visitor insisted on waiting. He said he has a message from someone who knew your father. Ji-hoon exchanged a cautious glance with Detective Kong. Who is he? The manager answered quietly. He refuses to give his name. He only said these words. The manager swallowed. Tell Han Ji-hoon that the sparrow has finally returned. Ji-hoon's eyes widened. His uncle had once mentioned that Sparrow was a code name of his father's most trusted investigative journalist, someone who disappeared years ago after exposing corruption. Ji-hoon looked at Detective Kong. If Sparrow is alive, then he may know everything my father never had the chance to write down. Outside the vault, an elderly man wearing a simple gray coat sat patiently on a wooden bench, holding a weathered leather briefcase. He looked ordinary, almost invisible, but inside that briefcase was evidence that could destroy powerful people, and finally reveal the mastermind behind Project Starlight. Ji-hoon, Stella, Detective Kong, and the chief investigator stepped out of the underground vault. The elderly man was still seated on the wooden bench. He calmly rose to his feet as they approached. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his face bore the lines of someone who had carried difficult secrets for many years. He bowed respectfully. Chairman Han. Ji-hoon studied him carefully. You knew my father? The old man smiled faintly. For more than 20 years. My name is Choi Hyun-woo. I was the investigative journalist your father called Sparrow. Ji-hoon's heart raced. So you're alive. Choi nodded. Barely. They moved into a private meeting room inside the bank. The old journalist placed his weathered leather briefcase on the table. I've spent the last 9 years hiding. Detective Kong looked puzzled. Why disappear? Because everyone who helped expose Project Starlight either died or disappeared. The room became silent. Choi slowly opened the briefcase. Inside were dozens of notebooks, audio recorders, memory cards, and newspaper clippings. I couldn't trust anyone, so I kept collecting evidence. Ji-hoon looked at him. Why come back now? Choi sighed. Because your father's message reached me. Ji-hoon frowned. My father's message? Yes. He told me. If anything happens to me, wait until my son finds the vault. Only then will he be ready to finish what I started. Ji-hoon lowered his head. Even after all these years, his father had been thinking several steps ahead. Choi removed one final item from a briefcase, a sealed envelope marked Confidential Master List. He slid it across the table. This is the list your father never managed to complete. Ji-hoon carefully opened it. Inside were the names of executives, politicians, business partners, and middlemen allegedly connected to Project Starlight. Most of the names meant nothing to Stella. But one name made Ji-hoon freeze. His hands trembled. No. Stella looked at him with concern. What is it? Ji-hoon slowly turned the paper toward Detective Kong. At the very top of the list was a name no one expected. Han Min-jae, Ji-hoon's own father. The room fell silent. Stella covered her mouth. That can't be right. Detective Kong quickly examined the document. Then he looked at Choi. Why is his name here? Choi closed his eyes for a moment, because that's exactly what they wanted everyone to believe. He pointed to a handwritten note beneath the name, listed as the mastermind after his death. Evidence planted to ensure the investigation ends with him. Ji-hoon let out a long breath. They framed my father. Choi nodded. They knew he was getting close. So they prepared a false trail. If the truth ever surfaced, he would be remembered as a criminal instead of the man who tried to stop them. Ji-hoon's eyes filled with emotion. For years, he had wondered why his father had become distant and burdened before his death. Now he understood. His father hadn't been hiding his guilt. He had been carrying the weight of protecting the truth. Just then, Choi reached into his coat pocket and placed a small voice recorder on the table. I protected this for nearly a decade. Ji-hoon picked it up. What's on it? Choi looked him straight in the eye. The voice of the person who ordered Project Starlight. And when you press play, you'll finally hear the mastermind speak for the very first time. The room was completely silent. Ji-hoon stared at the small voice recorder resting in his hand. It looked ordinary, but everyone in the room understood that it might contain the evidence they had been searching for. Detective Kong nodded. Play it. Ji-hoon pressed a button. A burst of static filled the room. Then, a man's voice spoke. It was calm, confident, cold. Project Starlight must continue. The reports will be changed. No one outside this room can know the truth. Another voice asked nervously, what if someone refuses to sign the inspection documents? The first man answered without hesitation. Transfer them. If they continue asking questions, destroy their credibility. The room fell silent again. Then came another sentence that sent chills through everyone. Honest people are the greatest threat to profitable lies. Stella lowered her eyes. Those words explained everything. The threats, the smear campaign, the attacks. She had been targeted because she represented the kind of person conspiracy feared most. Someone who would not lie. The recording continued. A second speaker entered the conversation. His voice was distorted, making it impossible to identify. And what about Han Min-jae? The first man laughed quietly. He's already collecting evidence. When the time comes, we'll make sure he takes the blame. Ji-hoon's hands clenched into fists. His father had known they were planning to frame him, yet he had continued fighting. Detective Kong stopped the recording. We have enough to reopen the investigation. But we still don't know who that first voice belongs to. Choi Hyun-woo nodded. I expected that question. He reached into his briefcase once more. I spent years trying to identify him. He placed a thin folder on the table. Inside are voice analysis reports. The experts couldn't give a definitive match, but they narrowed it down to 3 possible people. Ji-hoon opened the folder. 3 photographs appeared. The first was a former government official. The second was a retired hospital executive. The third photograph made Ji-hoon stop breathing for a moment. It was someone he had known almost his entire life. Someone who had attended family celebrations. Someone who had stood beside his father at company events. Someone Ji-hoon had trusted. He whispered, "It can't be." Stella looked over his shoulder. Her eyes widened too. The photograph was of Han Sung-tae, Ji-hoon's uncle, the very man who had given him the key to the hidden vault. The room fell into stunned silence. Detective Kong looked from the photograph to Ji-hoon. We don't know if he's guilty. It's only one of 3 possible matches. Ji-hoon slowly closed the folder. His heart was heavy. His uncle had helped him. He had protected the key for 10 years. Nothing about that fit the actions of a mastermind. And yet, the evidence demanded that no possibility be ignored. Just then, Ji-hoon's phone vibrated. A text message appeared from an unknown number. Don't accuse the wrong person. A second message arrived immediately afterward. The real mastermind is already inside your investigation team. Ji-hoon looked up sharply. Someone knew exactly what they had just discovered, which meant only one thing. The conspiracy wasn't just watching from the outside. Someone in the investigation was secretly reporting every move they made. The anonymous message changed everything. Ji-hoon read it again. The real mastermind is already inside your investigation team. Detective Kong frowned. How could anyone know what happened in this room? Only 5 people had been present. Ji-hoon, Stella, Detective Kong, Chief Investigator Lee, Choi Hyun-woo, and the bank manager had only escorted them to the room. No one else should have known about the voice recording. Ji-hoon looked around slowly. If that message is true, then someone here is leaking information. No one spoke. The silence was heavier than any accusation. Choi Hyun-woo broke the tension. Years ago, your father gave me one piece of advice. He looked directly at Ji-hoon. Never accuse anyone while you're angry. Facts first. Conclusions later. Ji-hoon took a deep breath. He's right. He put his phone away. We don't accuse anyone. We investigate everyone. Detective Kong nodded in agreement. Starting today, every piece of information will be compartmentalized. We'll tell each person something slightly different, and we'll see which version reaches our enemy. Chief Investigator Lee smiled. A leak test. Exactly, Kong replied. That evening, everyone returned to the safe house. Mrs. Park welcomed them with a warm meal, but she immediately sensed something was wrong. No one is talking. Stella forced a smile. We've had a long day. Mrs. Park gently placed a bowl of soup in front of her. Even the longest day ends. Don't lose hope. Stella nodded gratefully. Later that night, Stella stepped outside into the garden. The air was cool. The stars were bright above the quiet trees. She heard footsteps behind her. It was Ji-hoon. He stood beside her without saying a word. After a while, Stella spoke softly. Do you trust me? Ji-hoon looked surprised. With my life. She smiled sadly. Then promise me something. What is it? If you ever discover that someone close to you is behind all this, don't let your love for them blind you to the truth. Ji-hoon looked at the night sky. I won't. He paused. But I also won't condemn someone without proof. Stella smiled. That's the answer I hoped you'd give. Just then, Detective Kang's phone rang. He answered immediately. Yes. His expression changed. When... He listened for another few seconds before ending the call. Ji-hoon stepped forward. What happened? The forensic laboratory finished its analysis, and the voice on the recording matches one of the 3 suspects with 98.7% confidence. The room fell silent. Ji-hoon's heartbeat quickened. Who? Detective Kong looked at him gravely. I'd rather show you than tell you. He handed Ji-hoon the sealed forensic report. Ji-hoon stared at the envelope. His fingers tightened around it. One name inside could destroy a family, clear an innocent person, or expose the mastermind they had been hunting for years. With Stella standing quietly beside him, Ji-hoon slowly broke the seal. His eyes scanned the report. Then his face turned completely pale. He whispered only 2 words. Impossible. The report slipped from his trembling hand and fell to the floor. No one else had seen the name yet, but whatever Ji-hoon had just read would change the course of their investigation forever. The report lay on the floor. No one moved. Ji-hoon stood frozen, staring at it as though he couldn't believe what he had just read. Stella bent down, picked up the document, and looked at him. Ji-hoon? He slowly shook his head. No, read it yourself. Stella carefully unfolded the report. Her eyes moved across the page until they reached the final line. Voice match result. 98.7% probability. Below it was the name. Kim Do-jin. Stella frowned. Who is Kim Do-jin? Detective Kong looked surprised. You don't know him? She shook her head. No. Ji-hoon took a deep breath. Neither did I. Until my father mentioned him once. Everyone looked at him. He was a former chief financial officer of Han Group. The man disappeared 11 years ago. Chief Investigator Lee added. Officially, he died in a boating accident. Ji-hoon looked at the report again. But if this voice belongs to him, then he never died. Choi Hyun-woo slowly removed his glasses. I had feared this day would come. You knew? Ji-hoon asked. I suspected. Choi nodded. When your father started investigating Project Starlight, Kim Do-jin vanished just days later. Everyone believed he was dead. But no body was ever recovered. Detective Kong leaned forward. So he faked his death. That's what it looks like. Just then, Chief Investigator Lee's laptop chimed. A secure email had arrived. He opened it. It's from our cybercrime team. What have they found? Ji-hoon asked. They traced one of the anonymous messages. Everyone gathered around the screen. The investigator's expression changed. This can't be. Ji-hoon frowned. What? The message wasn't sent from outside. It originated inside Han Group headquarters. Detective Kong looked thoughtful. So Kim Do-jin may still have someone working for him. Or, Choi said quietly, someone has been protecting his network all these years. Meanwhile, far across Seoul, in a luxurious penthouse apartment, a man stood before a wall of windows overlooking the city. His hair was streaked with gray. A long scar across the left side of his face. On the desk, beside him lay an old newspaper with the headline, Han Group executive presumed dead in boating tragedy. The man smiled faintly. He picked up a phone. They finally remember my name. A nervous voice replied, Should we eliminate them? The man looked out at the glittering skyline. No, not yet. I've waited 11 years. I can wait a little longer. He ended the call and opened a drawer. Inside was an old photograph. It showed a much younger Kim Do-jin standing beside Han Min-jae. The two men were smiling like brothers. Kim traced the edge of the photograph with his finger. So, Min-jae, you kept your promise. You left the truth for your son. His smile slowly disappeared. But now, it's my turn to tell him the part of the story you never knew. Across the city, Ji-hoon had no idea that the man he believed was the mastermind was preparing to reveal an even greater secret. Because Kim Do-jin was not running from the truth. He had been hiding from someone far more dangerous. The following morning, the investigation team gathered again at the safe house. Detective Kong pinned several photographs and documents onto a large board. In the center was one name, Kim Do-jin. Around it were arrows leading to Project Starlight, shell companies, secret bank accounts, and mysterious attacks on Stella. Ji-hoon studied the board. Everything points to him. Choi Hyun-woo slowly shook his head. Be careful. Ji-hoon looked at him. What do you mean? For years, I believed Kim Do-jin was a mastermind. He paused, but something never made sense. What? If he truly wanted Han Min-jae dead, why did he secretly help your father several times before disappearing? The room fell silent. That was a question none of them could answer. Just then, the chief investigator entered with an envelope. It arrived this morning. There was no sender. Ji-hoon immediately became cautious. Check it. The security team scanned the envelope. No explosives. No dangerous substances. Only a single sheet of paper. Ji-hoon unfolded it. It contained only one sentence. If you want the truth, come alone to the old observatory tonight. At 9 p.m. bring Stella. Trust no one else. There was no signature. Detective Kong frowned. It could be a trap. Choi nodded. Or it could be the only chance we'll get. Stella looked at Ji-hoon. What do you think? Ji-hoon read the note again. Then he noticed something unusual. The final letter of each line was written with slightly darker ink. He arranged them together. They formed a single word. Sparrow. He looked at Choi. Only you and my father knew that code name. Choi's expression turned serious. I didn't send it. That evening, despite every warning, Ji-hoon made his decision. We're going. Detective Kong objected immediately. It's too dangerous. I know, but if someone risks sending this message, they may have information we can't ignore. The detective sighed. Then you're not going alone. Ji-hoon smiled faintly. I thought the note said to trust no one else. Detective Kong replied, and that's exactly why I'll be nearby. At 8:55 p.m., Ji-hoon and Stella arrived at the abandoned observatory overlooking Seoul. The building was old. Its windows were cracked. The wind whistled through the empty halls. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. They climbed the narrow staircase to the observation deck. No one was there. Stella looked around. Are we too early? Before Ji-hoon could answer, a familiar voice echoed from the darkness. No, you're exactly on time. A man slowly stepped into the moonlight. Ji-hoon's eyes widened. He recognized him instantly. It was Kim Do-jin, alive, older. The scar across his face was unmistakable. He raised both hands to show he carried no weapon. I know you think I'm your enemy, he said calmly. But if you don't listen to me tonight, Han Soo-yeon will kill every one of us. Stella and Ji-hoon exchanged a stunned look. For the first time, someone had openly accused Han Soo-yeon. And if Kim Do-jin was telling the truth, then the woman they had suspected for months was not merely protecting a conspiracy. She was leading it. The cold wind swept across the abandoned observatory. For several long seconds, no one spoke. Ji-hoon stood protectively in front of Stella. His eyes never left Kim Do-jin. You expect me to believe you? Ji-hoon asked. Kim nodded calmly. No, I expect you to question everything. He slowly reached inside his coat. Ji-hoon's posture tensed. Kim immediately stopped. It's not a weapon. He carefully removed a thick envelope and placed it on the dusty floor several feet away. You can inspect it yourselves. Detective Kong, who had been watching from a hidden position nearby, quietly stepped forward. He examined the envelope. No explosives. No tracking device. He handed it to Ji-hoon. Inside were old photographs, meeting minutes, bank transfer records, and one photograph that made Ji-hoon freeze. It showed his father, Han Min-jae, standing beside Kim Do-jin. Both men were smiling. On the back of the photograph, written in Han Min-jae's handwriting, were the words, "To my brother, in truth, we finished this together." Ji-hoon's eyes filled with emotion. My father trusted you. Kim lowered his head. He saved my life. Kim looked toward Stella. I owe you an apology. Stella frowned. For what? Because you were never supposed to become part of this. He took a slow breath. When your mother attended that medical ethics conference years ago, your father and Han Min-jae helped expose a shipment of counterfeit medicines that was headed for several African hospitals. Stella's heart skipped a beat. My mother never told me that. They asked everyone involved to remain silent. They feared retaliation. Kim continued. When Project Starlight grew larger, they began identifying medical professionals who could not be bribed. They kept confidential lists, not to target them, but to recruit them when the time came to expose a conspiracy. Stella's eyes widened. So my name, Kim nodded, was added after your professors described you as one of the most ethical nursing students they had ever taught. Ji-hoon looked at the old files again. So they weren't hunting Stella from the beginning. Kim shook his head. No, they wanted her on their side. What changed? Ji-hoon asked. Kim's expression darkened. Han Soo-yeon discovered the list. And once she realized Stella could become a witness, she decided Stella was safer as a suspect than as an ally. Detective Kong stepped closer. If Han Soo-yeon is really behind this, why frame Han Min-jae? Kim looked toward the city lights below. Because your father refused to sign documents approving counterfeit medical supplies. He threatened to expose everyone involved. They couldn't buy him. They couldn't intimidate him. So they built a false trail, hoping history would remember him as the villain. Ji-hoon closed his eyes. For years, his father's reputation had carried a shadow he never deserved. Now, the truth was finally emerging. Just then, a sharp red laser that appeared on Kim Do-jin's chest. Detective Kong reacted instantly. Sniper. Before anyone could move. Crack! A gunshot echoed through the night. Kim shoved Ji-hoon sideways with all his strength. The bullet struck Kim in the shoulder instead. He collapsed to the ground. Kim! Stella shouted. Without hesitation, she rushed to him despite Detective Kong yelling for her to stay back. She pressed both hands firmly against the wound to slow the bleeding. Stay with me, she pleaded. Kim struggled to breathe. With trembling hands, he grabbed Ji-hoon's sleeve. There isn't much time. He pulled a small metal key from his pocket and forced it into Ji-hoon's hand. The lighthouse. Locker 27. You'll find. His voice faded. He looked directly at Stella. Your mother was right to trust. Before he could finish, another gunshot rang out from the darkness. The lights around the observatory suddenly went out. Everything was plunged into darkness. And somewhere in the hills above them, the sniper prepared to fire again. The next morning, the atmosphere at the hospital was tense. 2 police officers stood outside Kim Do-jin's room. Additional security guards monitored every entrance. After the previous kidnapping, Detective Kong wasn't taking any chances. No visitors without my approval, he ordered. No exceptions. Inside the room, Kim slowly opened his eyes. The first face he saw was Stella's. She smiled with relief. Welcome back. Kim looked around weakly. I survived. You did. And you have an excellent surgeon to thank. Kim gave a faint smile. I think I have an excellent nurse to thank, too. Stella laughed softly. You've thanked me enough. Ji-hoon stepped closer. You mentioned a lighthouse. Kim's smile faded. His expression became serious. You don't have much time. Han So-yeon will already be searching. He reached beneath his pillow and handed Ji-hoon a folded piece of paper. I couldn't say everything last night. Ji-hoon unfolded it. It wasn't a map. It was a sketch of the Korean coastline. A small red circle marked one location. Below it were 3 handwritten words. East Sea Lighthouse. And beneath that, Locker 27. Detective Kong examined the drawing. Dozens of lighthouses stand along the East Sea. Kim nodded, but only one has public storage lockers. He pointed to a faded note, near the old fishing harbor. Choi Hyun-woo immediately recognized it. I know that place. I met your father there once. Ji-hoon looked at him. Then we're leaving now. 3 hours later, a black SUV sped along the coastal highway. Ji-hoon drove. Stella sat beside him. Detective Kong and Choi followed in another vehicle. The sea stretched endlessly beside them. The waves crashed against the rocks below. For the first time in days, Stella admired the scenery. It's beautiful. Ji-hoon smiled. My father loved this coast. He always said the sea reminded him that no storm lasts forever. Stella looked out the horizon. I hope he was right. Meanwhile, hundreds of kilometers away, Han So-yeon received a phone call. They've left Seoul. She smiled. Excellent. Follow them. But don't interfere. The caller sounded confused. Shouldn't we stop them before they reach the lighthouse? No. So-yeon replied calmly. I've waited years. I want to see what Han Min-jae left behind. She ended the call, then quietly added, after that, nothing else will matter. Late that afternoon, the convoy arrived at the small coastal town. The lighthouse stood proudly on a rocky cliff overlooking the sea. Fishing boats drifted peacefully in the harbor below. Tourists wandered along the pier, completely unaware of the dangerous secret hidden nearby. Ji-hoon looked toward the old lighthouse. This is it. As they climbed the stone steps toward the entrance, an elderly lighthouse keeper greeted them. Good afternoon. Ji-hoon showed him the old metal key. The keeper stared at it in surprise. I haven't seen one of those in many years. He slowly unlocked a small storage room beneath the lighthouse. Rows of numbered lockers lined the walls. Ji-hoon walked slowly along the row. 23, 24, 25, 26. Then he stopped. Locker 27. His hands trembled as he inserted the key. The lock clicked. He pulled the door open. Inside was a single waterproof metal case. Stamped across the lid were the words, "Open only if the truth must be known." Before Ji-hoon could reach for it, a voice echoed through the storage room. "Don't open it." Everyone spun around. Standing in the doorway was Han Soo-yeon. She wasn't alone. Behind her stood several armed mercenaries. She looked at Ji-hoon with a calm smile. "I've spent 10 years making sure that case stayed closed." She raised her hand. "Now, give it to me." The lighthouse, once a symbol of hope for sailors lost at sea, had become the stage for the final confrontation between truth and deception. The storage room fell silent. The only sound was the distant crash of waves against the rocks below. Ji-hoon slowly lifted the metal case from locker 27. He kept his eyes on Han Soo-yeon. "You've been chasing this for 10 years. Seo-yeon smiled. "And you've been walking exactly where I expected." Her mercenaries raised their weapons. Detective Kong quietly stepped in front of Stella. No sudden movements. The elderly lighthouse keeper looked terrified. I don't understand what's happening." Stella spoke gently. "Please step behind us." The old man nodded and hurried into a corner of the room. Even in that tense moment, Stella's first instinct was to protect someone else. Seo-yeon noticed. She shook her head. "That's always been your weakness, Stella. You care too much." Stella met her gaze. "I don't see compassion as a weakness." "No," Seo-yeon replied coldly. "It's why people like you lose." Ji-hoon tightened his grip on the case. "You framed my father. You attacked innocent people. You tried to destroy Stella's life. For what?" Seo-yeon's smile slowly faded. "For survival." She took one step forward. "You call it corruption. I call it protecting an empire." She gestured toward the case. "That evidence would have destroyed Han Group." Ji-hoon answered firmly. "No, it would have destroyed the criminals hiding inside it." At that moment, Stella noticed something unusual. One of the mercenaries kept glancing toward the windows. He wasn't watching Ji-hoon. He was watching the sea. She quietly whispered to Detective Kong, "Something's wrong." Kong subtly looked in the same direction. Far below the cliff, a fast boat was approaching the lighthouse at high speed. More armed men. "They planned a second team," Kong whispered. "They're surrounding us." Seo-yeon extended her hand. "Last chance. Give me the case." Ji-hoon slowly looked down at it. Then he smiled. "You've made one mistake." Seo-yeon frowned. "And what's that?" "You assumed the truth was inside the case." Before anyone could react, Ji-hoon handed the case to Stella. She immediately understood, without hesitation. She ran toward the narrow spiral staircase leading to the top of the lighthouse. "Stop her," Seo-yeon shouted. Two mercenaries rushed after Stella. Detective Kong moved instantly, blocking the staircase. A fierce struggle broke out. Ji-hoon used a distraction to confront Seo-yeon. Outside, police sirens suddenly echoed across the harbor. Seo-yeon's expression changed. She turned toward the windows. Several police boats were racing toward the lighthouse. Helicopters appeared overhead. Searchlights swept across the coastline. Detective Kong smiled despite the chaos. "I never said we came alone." The lighthouse shook as the first police officers stormed the lower level. The final battle for Project Starlight had begun. But high above them, Stella reached the lantern room at the top of the lighthouse. She set the metal case on the floor and finally opened it. Inside was no money, no jewels, no confidential contracts. There was only a single sealed envelope, addressed in Han Min-jae's handwriting, to Stella Bello. Stella's hands began to tremble. Why would Ji-hoon's father leave his final message? That for her? The sounds of shouting and footsteps echoed from the floors below. The lighthouse trembled as police officers and mercenaries fought for control of the building. But inside the lantern room, everything felt strangely still. Stella stared at the envelope. Written in neat handwriting were the words, "To Stella Bello, if this letter reaches you, it means you chose truth over fear." Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. She began to read. "Dear Stella, We have never truly met. Yet I have known about you for many years through your mother, Grace Bello. She once told me that she hoped her daughter will become the kind of nurse who protects every patient equally, whether rich or poor. If you are reading this today, then her prayer has already been answered. Tears welled in Stella's eyes. She remembered her mother repeating those same words when she was a child. She continued reading. You may be wondering why I entrusted this letter to you instead of my own son. The answer is simple. Ji-hoon has inherited my courage, but you have reminded him of his compassion. A leader who possesses only courage may win battles. A leader who possesses courage and compassion can change the world. Stella covered her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. Downstairs, Ji-hoon and Detective Kong fought to hold the stairwell. Police officers were pushing the mercenaries back. Han Soo-yoon realized the situation was slipping out of her control. She glanced toward the staircase leading to the lantern room. No, she whispered. She must not read that letter. Ignoring the officers around her, Seo-yoon broke free and sprinted toward the stairs. Stop her, Detective Kong shouted. But Seo-yoon was fast. She climbed higher and higher. In the lantern room, Stella reached the final page. Han Min-jae had written one last message. If Project Starlight is ever exposed, do not seek revenge. Justice built on hatred creates another generation of victims. Tell Ji-hoon to rebuild what others corrupted. Tell him to protect those who cannot protect themselves. And tell him that I was proud to call him my son. At the bottom of the page was a postscript. P.S. There is one final piece of evidence hidden beneath the lighthouse beacon. It will prove everything beyond doubt. Stella's eyes widened. She looked up toward the enormous rotating beacon above her. There was a small metal compartment beneath its base. Just as she stepped toward it, the lantern room door burst open. Han So-yoon stood in the doorway, breathing heavily. Her eyes were fixed on the letter. It's too late, Stella said quietly. I've read it. Seo-yoon's expression hardened. Then give it to me. Stella folded the letter carefully and held it close to her chest. No. Seo-yoon slowly pulled a small pistol from inside her coat. I wasn't asking. For a moment, neither woman moved. The wind howled around the lighthouse. The beacon continued to rotate, sending its brilliant light across the dark sea. Then Ji-hoon's voice echoed from the staircase below. Stella. Seo-yoon glanced toward the door for only a fraction of a second. It was the opening Stella needed. She reached for the hidden metal compartment beneath the beacon. Just as Seo-yoon lunged forward to stop her, Stella pulled open the small metal compartment beneath the lighthouse beacon. Inside was a waterproof memory card sealed in a transparent case. She barely had time to grasp it. Han Seo-yoon lunged forward. Give it to me. The two women struggled for the small case. It slipped from Stella's fingers and slid across the wooden floor. Seo-yoon reached for it, but the lantern room door burst open. Stella. Ji-hoon rushed inside, followed closely by Detective Kong and two police officers. Seo-yoon quickly turned and pointed her pistol at Ji-hoon. No one move. The room froze. The lighthouse beacon continued its slow rotation, sending flashes of brilliant white light across everyone's faces. Seo-yoon's eyes filled with desperation. You don't understand, she said. If those files become public, thousands of people will lose their jobs. Han Group will collapse. Entire hospitals will close. Ji-hoon looked at her steadily. You spent years telling yourself that corruption was necessary. It never was. Seo-yoon's hand trembled. I did what I believed would save the company. And how many innocent people suffered because of that? Stella asked quietly. The question hung in the air. For the first time, Seo-yoon had no answer. Detective Kong slowly stepped aside. Lower the weapon. It's over. Before Seo-yoon could respond, a loud voice echoed from the staircase. Nobody move. Everyone turned. A man in black tactical gear appeared in the doorway. He was followed by 3 armed mercenaries. Ji-hoon's face hardened. Kim Do-jin sniper. The man removed his mask. A long scar across his cheek. He smiled coldly. You've all been chasing the wrong enemy. He looked directly at Seo-yoon. You've served your purpose. Seo-yoon stared at him in disbelief. What are you talking about? The man laughed. Did you really think you were in control? He raised his rifle. You were only ever a convenient distraction. The room fell silent. Stella slowly realized the truth. Han Seo-yeon had committed terrible crimes, but she had also been manipulated. The real architect of Project Starlight had remained hidden all along. The mercenary leader pointed his rifle toward the memory card lying on the floor. Kick it over. No one moved. I said, kick it over. Instead, Ji-hoon quietly nudged the memory card backward with his foot toward Stella. The mercenary noticed. He pulled the trigger. Bang! The bullet shattered a glass panel. At the same instant, Stella dove forward and grabbed the memory card. Run! Ji-hoon shouted. She sprinted toward the narrow maintenance ladder behind the beacon. The mercenaries chased after her. Detective Kong and the police exchanged fire with them, forcing them back. Ji-hoon confronted the Scarface leader in a fierce struggle. Outside, the lighthouse beacon continued to sweep across the dark sea. One bright flash illuminated the harbor, then another. Far below, a Coast Guard vessel spotted the unusual activity and immediately radioed for reinforcements. The fight inside the lighthouse had become impossible to ignore, but as Stella climbed higher into the narrow service platform with the memory card clutched tightly in her hand, she heard the mercenary leader shout one chilling sentence. Without that card, we lose everything. Stella realized that what she carried was more than evidence. It was a key that could finally expose the entire conspiracy. And now, every remaining enemy was coming after her. The narrow service platform shook beneath Stella's feet. The wind roared around the lighthouse beacon. Below her, voices echoed to the tower. She's going up. Don't let her escape. Stella tightened her grip on the waterproof memory card. She wasn't running to save herself anymore. She was running to protect the truth. Ji-hoon blocked the mercenary leader's path. The man swung the butt of his rifle. Ji-hoon ducked just in time. The weapon slammed into the metal railing, sending sparks into the air. The mercenary laughed. You're brave. Ji-hoon answered with a determined look. I'm my father's son. The two men clashed again. Meanwhile, Detective Kong and the police slowly pushed the remaining mercenaries toward the stairwell. High above them, Stella reached a small emergency platform beneath the lighthouse lantern. There was nowhere else to run. She looked out across the sea. Police boats were approaching. A Coast Guard helicopter circled overhead. She took a deep breath and removed the memory card from its waterproof case. Then she noticed something unusual. The back of the card had tiny words engraved into the plastic. Duplicate uploaded automatically upon activation. She frowned. What does that mean? Just then, Choi Hyun-woo's voice crackled through the emergency radio clipped to a police officer's belt below. Stella, if that's the card Han Min-jae designed, it contains an emergency transmission system. Insert into any connected computer. It will automatically send encrypted copies of the evidence to multiple trusted journalists and international investigators. Stella's eyes widened. Han Min-jae had planned for this. Even if someone destroyed the original card, the truth would survive. Back inside the lantern room, the Scarface mercenary overheard the radio. His confident smile disappeared. No! He shouted toward his men. Stop her before she uploads anything. He broke away from Ji-hoon and raced up the final ladder. Ji-hoon ignored the pain in his bruised ribs and followed. At the very top of the lighthouse, Stella found a maintenance computer used to monitor the rotating beacon. Her hands shook as she inserted the memory card. The screen flickered. A single message appeared. Verify identity. Below it was a fingerprint scanner. Stella hesitated. Then she remembered Han Min-jae's letter. If this reaches Stella Bello. She gently placed her thumb on the scanner. A soft tone sounded. Identity confirmed. The upload began. 1%. Footsteps thundered up the ladder. 12%. The mercenary leader climbed onto platform. He raised his pistol. Step away from the computer. 28%. Stella didn't move. She simply looked him in the eyes. You spent years hiding the truth. It's time the world saw it. The mercenary aimed carefully. His finger tightened on the trigger. Just as he fired, Ji-hoon leaped from the ladder and tackled him. The The gunshot shattered a window instead. Glass rained across the platform. The two men rolled dangerously close to the edge. The computer continued counting. 61%, 78%, 94%. The mercenary broke free and reached desperately for the keyboard. But Stella slammed protective cover shut. 100%. Transmission complete. A new message appeared across the screen. Evidence successfully delivered to 43 verified recipients. At that exact moment, phones began ringing in newsrooms, anti-corruption agencies, and prosecutors' offices across multiple countries. Project Starlight was no longer a secret. No one could bury it again. The mercenary leader stared at the screen in horror. Then he slowly lowered his weapon. For the first time in over a decade, the truth had won. Silence filled the lighthouse. The only sound was the steady rotation of the great beacon overhead. The mercenary leader stared at the screen. The words remained unchanged. Transmission complete. His shoulders slowly dropped. Years of secrecy, gone in a single moment. Outside, the first rays of sunrise began to spread across the sea. Police helicopters circled above the lighthouse. Coast Guard officers surrounded the harbor. There was nowhere left to run. Detective Kong climbed onto the platform with several officers. It's over. The mercenary leader looked around. He knew he had lost. Without another word, he dropped his weapon onto the floor. One by one, the remaining mercenaries surrendered. Handcuffs clicked into place. For the first time in years, the people responsible for protecting conspiracy were no longer in control. Han So-yeon stood quietly near the doorway. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon. She looked exhausted, not defeated, just tired. Ji-hoon approached her. You could have walked away years ago. She smiled sadly. I told myself I was protecting the company. She lowered her head, but somewhere along the way, I forgot I was supposed to protect people. Detective Kong stepped forward. Han So-yeon, you are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice, and multiple related offenses. She offered no resistance. As the officers led her away, she stopped beside Stella. I spent years believing kindness was weakness. She looked into Stella's eyes. You proved me wrong. Then she continued walking toward the waiting police vehicle. Hours later, news broke across South Korea, then across Asia, then around the world. Investigative journalists published the Project Starlight files. Health authorities announced emergency reviews of medical procurement contracts. International agencies opened investigations into counterfeit medicines and financial crimes. Han Group's board held an emergency meeting. That afternoon, Ji-hoon addressed the media. Standing before dozens of cameras, he spoke calmly. My father believed that no company is greater than the lives it serves. Today, Han Group accepts responsibility for uncovering every part of this tragedy. We will cooperate fully with every investigation. And we will rebuild this company on honesty, transparency, and compassion. Reporters filled the room with applause. Several weeks later, the hospital where Stella worked held a small ceremony. Doctors, nurses, patients, everyone gathered together. The hospital director stepped onto stage. Today, we honor Nurse Stella Bello. He smiled warmly, not because she was fearless, but because she chose compassion, even when fear would have been easier. The audience stood in a long ovation. Stella looked around the room, overwhelmed. She hadn't sought recognition. She had simply done what she believed was right. After the ceremony, Ji-hoon found Stella standing in the hospital garden beneath the blooming cherry trees. He held a small wooden box. I have something for you. She opened it. Inside was Han Min-jae's fountain pen, the same pen he had used to write the letters that changed their lives. Ji-hoon smiled. My father believed this should belong to someone who would keep writing a better future. Stella gently held the pen. I'll treasure it. Ji-hoon took a slow breath. Our story began on a rainy bus. It survived lies, danger, and loss. He looked at her with a warm smile. Would you let me take you to dinner? Without bodyguards, detectives, or conspiracies? Stella laughed. A genuine, joyful laugh he hadn't heard in a long time. I'd like that. Together, they walked through the garden as the morning sunlight filtered through the cherry blossoms. For the first time since they met, They weren't running toward danger. They were simply walking toward tomorrow. Thank you listening and watching this story.